Hey there, tonight we're uncovering the rugged reality of 19th century California mining. Not the gold-dusted dreams of fortune, but the relentless grit and shadowy camps beneath the Sierra Nevada's whispering pines. If these stories help you unwind, I'd love a quick like or subscribe, but only if they're genuinely working for you. I'm curious where in the world you're listening from, so drop your location and local time in the comments. It's amazing seeing our little community span the globe through these historical tales. Now find your comfort zone, perhaps turn on a fan for that gentle background hum, and let's venture into tonight's story together. Your eyes flicker open to a crack of dawn that smells like adventure and dust. Welcome to 19th century California, where the air is buzzing with more than just the promise of a new day. It's 1849, and the gold rush is the hardest ticket in town. You won't find any glitzy red carpets here, though. Instead, everyone's got gold fever, and it's contagious enough to have dragged you out of your cozy bed back east. Forget creature comforts. You've traded them for dreams of striking it rich. Spoiler alert, it's not going to be as glamorous as it sounds. The morning sun casts long shadows across a bustling encampment. It's a mix of ramshackle tents and hastily built wooden shacks, all jostling for space like eager claimants at a land grab. You might be picturing a scene out of a Western movie, with grizzled old-timers striking gold with every swing of their pickaxe. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. The reality is less instant millionaire and more sweat and sore muscles. You're in the company of thousands of hopeful souls who have poured in from all corners of the globe. Ships are docking in San Francisco faster than you can say, Eureka, bringing people from as far as China and Chile. The population of San Francisco itself ballooned from a sleepy 1,000 in 1848 to a bustling 25,000 by 1850. That's right, the city exploded like a kernel of popcorn, and you can almost feel the energy crackling in the air. Back home, you heard tales of nuggets just lying around for the taking, of fortunes made overnight. But here's the first mythbuster. Gold isn't just there waiting to jump into your hands. You quickly learn that every glint of gold comes with a side of back-breaking labor. The reality is fewer jackpots and more jack-of-all-trades, as you take on the roles of a miner, cook, and sometimes even a doctor if you happen to know how to stitch a wound or two. The journey to get here was no picnic either. If you came overland, you braved the 2,000-mile trek across the wild frontiers of America. The trip took about 6 months, with your wagon wheel-deep in mud more often than not. And let's not forget the sea route, the adventurous path around Cape Horn, which could take 5 months, or possibly longer if you were unlucky enough to hit a patch of doldrums. Either way, you've likely spent a pretty penny just getting here, not to mention risking life and limb. It's a different world out here, with laws as flexible as a gymnast. Sure, there's an official tax of $20 a month for foreign miners, but enforcement is as sparty as the local rainfall. Vigilante justice and self-governance are the names of this lawless game. Who has time for rules when there's gold to be had, right? As you head to your claim, you can't help but notice the patchwork quilt of cultures around you. The goldfields are a melting pot, albeit one with a low boiling point. You hear a babel of languages, each with its own unique rhythm, from the lilting notes of Italian and Spanish to the clipped tones of Mandarin. It's a cacophony of ambition and desperation, where alliances form and dissolve as quickly as morning mist. You might think that living conditions are just minor inconveniences on the path to wealth, but reality likes to throw curveballs. The camps are crowded, sanitation is a distant dream, and fresh water is more precious than gold itself. Disease is your constant companion, and the lack of medical care means even a minor cut could lead to serious trouble. This isn't the brochure you signed up for, is it? In the thick of the day, as the sun climbs higher and your muscles start to protest, you meet seasoned miners who laugh off your enthusiasm with a knowing wink. You'll see, they say, it's not all glitter and glory. These veterans have been at it for a while, their faces etched with the lines of 1,000 stories, each one more daunting than the last. They tell you about the harsh winters, the relentless heat, and the ever-present danger of landslides and cave-ins. It's a reminder that Mother Nature has a sense of humor, and not always the friendly kind. As you dig and pan, the romantic notion of easy riches starts to crumble like the dirt between your fingers. You're not just fighting the land, You're competing with a horde of other prospectors, each one as hungry and hopeful as you are. It's a rat race, and the cheese is nowhere in sight. But hope is a stubborn thing, and every tiny speck of gold you find feeds the fire in your belly. You take a moment to pause and look around. The landscape is rugged and beautiful, a tapestry of rolling hills and towering trees. It's a stark contrast to the chaos of the camps, a reminder of the untamed wilderness that drew you here in the first place. You can't help but wonder if the land itself is the true treasure, a prize that's been here long before gold was even a whisper on the wind. As the sun begins its descent, painting the sky with hues of orange and pink, you're exhausted. But there's a strange satisfaction in your weariness, a sense of accomplishment that comes from a day well spent, even if your pockets aren't jingling with gold. You might not be a millionaire yet, but you've gained something else, a deeper understanding of the world around you and your place in it. You retreat to your makeshift shelter, where the evening air is cool and crisp. The camp is alive with the sounds of laughter and camaraderie, a community forged in the crucible of hardship and hope. You share stories with your fellow miners, tales of near misses and small victories, each one adding to the rich tapestry of life in the goldfields. As you close your eyes, the dreams of gold still dance in your mind, but they're tempered by the gritty reality of the day. Tomorrow is another opportunity, another chance to strike it rich, or at least survive another day in the wild, wild West. And as you drift off to sleep, you can't help but smile at the absurdity of it all, the grand adventure that is the California gold rush. As you drift off to dreams of gold, tempered by the gritty reality of the day, the camp around you comes alive with the quiet hum of a restless night. It's a symphony of dreams and snoring, punctuated by the occasional cough, a reminder of the ever-present dust. But let's not get carried away with the romance of the wilderness lullaby. You've got a long day ahead, filled with the kind of tasks that'd make your back scream louder than a banshee at a rock concert. Morning breaks over the camp, and it's time to embrace the dirt and grit of a miner's life. First on the agenda, mining techniques that were the era's equivalent of the latest tech trends. Think of panning and sluicing as the tick-tock dances of the gold rush. Everyone's doing them, and if you're not, you're missing out. Panning is the bread and butter of the newbie miner. It's simple: a pan, a bit of water, and a lot of hope. Swirl, slosh, and sift through the sediment, praying for that glint of gold. It's like playing the lottery, except your ticket is a metal pan, and your prize is a few flecks of shiny metal. Sluicing, on the other hand, is for those who have graduated from the school of hard knocks with honors. It's a more sophisticated setup, a long, narrow box with riffles at the bottom to catch heavier materials like gold while lighter stuff washes away. In theory, it's efficient. In practice, it's backbreaking labor that makes CrossFit look like a leisurely stroll. But hey, anything to increase your odds, right? After all, every ounce of gold is worth its weight in, well, you get the idea. Now, let's talk economics, because dreams of gold aren't the only thing draining your pockets. Welcome to the harsh reality of 1849 economics, where every nugget you find is offset by the cost of living in this wild frontier. Equipment isn't cheap, and neither is the food that'll keep you swinging that pickaxe. A decent pick might run you $10, and a shovel another $5. Eye-watering sums when you consider the average worker back home was earning barely $1 a day. And let's not forget the necessity of a gold pan, setting you back another $2. If you're eyeing a sluice box, prepare to fork over upwards of $50. It's almost enough to make you wish you'd stayed home and taken up knitting. As for food, you'll find that a sack of flour is a precious commodity, costing around $6, a small fortune in a place where inflation runs rampant. Luxuries like eggs and milk are rarer than finding a unicorn in your backyard, and priced accordingly. Lodging, if you can call it that. You might rent a patch of ground to pitch your tent for a couple of dollars a day, or if you're feeling fancy, bunk in a wooden shack for $10 a week. It's a far cry from the comforts of home, but who needs a feather bed when you're dreaming of gold? But let's not get lost in the economics of survival. There's another layer to this tale, the social dynamics of a rapidly expanding frontier. The gold rush is a melting pot, and not the kind you'll find on a fondue menu. It's a chaotic blend of languages, cultures, and ambitions, each adding its own flavor to the stew. Thousands of people from around the world have converged here, each with dreams as diverse as the places they came from. Chinese immigrants, drawn by tales of instant wealth, play a crucial role in the mining camps. They're often subjected to the harshest labor and discrimination, yet their resilience is legendary. They bring with them techniques and skills, some of which are swiftly adopted by other miners. Meanwhile, Latin American miners from places like Chile and Peru also make their mark, introducing methods like the arrastra, a primitive mill used to crush ore. It's a testament to the ingenuity and adaptability required to survive in this hardscrabble world. Let's not overlook the women, few and far between in this testosterone-filled tableau. Those who brave the frontier are often entrepreneurs, running boarding houses, laundries, or bakeries. Some even take on mining themselves, proving that determination isn't bound by gender. And then there's the complex issue of Native American tribes, whose lands have been overrun by this gold-hungry invasion. Their story is one of resilience and tragedy, as they navigate the onslaught of settlers reshaping their ancestral territories. As the sun reaches its zenith, you pause to take in the scene. It's a bustling mosaic of ambition and desperation, where alliances are forged and broken as quickly as fortunes rise and fall. The air is thick with the scent of sweat and dreams, a potent mix that fuels the fever driving this grand adventure. It's easy to romanticize the gold rush as a time of endless opportunity, but the reality is far more nuanced. Here, in the heart of the California wilderness, you're not just panning for gold, you're mining for a future, sifting through the sediment of hopes and dreams. As the day wears on, the camps become a living testament to human tenacity and folly. Your fellow miners are a motley crew, each with a story as colorful as the landscape around you. There's camaraderie here, forged in the fires of hardship and hope. But it's a fragile thing, as transient as the gold dust in your pan. In a world where fortunes are made and lost in the blink of an eye, trust is a currency more precious than gold. As evening descends, you gather with your fellow miners around a flickering campfire. The glow illuminates faces etched with determination, eyes reflecting the flickering flames of ambition. Stories are swapped, laughter shared, and for a moment, the harshness of the day fades into the background. It's a fleeting respite, a chance to recharge before the sun rises on another day of digging, dreaming, and daring to chase what might seem unattainable. And so the cycle continues, day after day, driven by the promise of gold and the lure of a better life. It's a wild ride, full of highs and lows, triumphs and tribulations. But isn't that the essence of the gold rush? A relentless pursuit of fortune, fueled by dreams and the grit to chase them, no matter the cost. As you prepare to turn in for the night, the camp settles into a quiet rhythm, readying itself for tomorrow's challenges. You know that this is just the beginning, a small chapter in a much larger story. There's more to uncover, more to learn, and as you drift into sleep once more, the anticipation of what lies ahead is almost enough to make you forget the aches and exhaustion. Almost. As the camp settles into a rhythm, its heartbeat syncs with the crackling of the campfire. You can't help but think about the absurdity of it all. Here you are, smack dab in the middle of what feels like the Wild West's version of a reality TV show, where every twist and turn is unscripted and potentially life-altering. But hold on to your hat, because if you think the physical labor was the only daunting part, wait until you hear about the legal chaos that ruled the day. Welcome to the wild world of mining claims, where the law of the land was about as stable as a house of cards in a windstorm. Picture this. You've staked a claim, a little patch of earth you hope will spit out gold like a slot machine. But here's the kicker. There's no official paperwork. That's right. In a world where a handshake carried more weight than a notarized document, disputes were as common as dust in a desert. Miners quickly realized that gold fever could turn even the friendliest of neighbors into fierce competitors, eyeing each other's territories with suspicion and greed. In the absence of formal law enforcement, miners developed their own set of rules, akin to the pirate codes, but without the fun sea shanties. They'd gather in makeshift assemblies, often under the shade of a towering pine, to establish rules and resolve disputes. It sounds democratic, right? But it was more like a high-stakes game of musical chairs, with claims being constantly contested and recontested. If you thought you could just set up shop and start digging, think again. Keeping a claim meant constantly defending it against claim jumpers, who were more than willing to swoop in and take over if you so much as blinked. The world of mining was a legal minefield, pun intended, with vigilante justice lurking in the wings. Disputes were settled with fists, knives, and occasionally pistols, because why not add a little extra drama to the mix? The unspoken rule was simple: defend your claim or lose it. And let's not forget about the miners' courts, where disputes were settled in a system that was part courtroom, part barroom brawl. These makeshift courts might have been the birthplace of Western justice, where the gavel was often a fist, and the jury was the crowd that happened to be gathered that day. Now, beyond the legal drama, let's talk about what all this mining was doing to the environment. Spoiler alert, Mother Nature was not pleased. The gold rush left scars on the landscape that would make even the most hardened miner weep. Rivers were rerouted, hillsides were stripped bare, and forests were felled with the kind of reckless abandon that makes modern-day deforestation look like a gentle pruning. Hydraulic mining, a newfangled technology of the time, was particularly destructive. Imagine a high-pressure fire hose blasting away entire mountainsides to get at the gold within. It was effective, sure, but it left behind a wasteland of mud and debris, a ghostly reminder of the cost of human ambition. This environmental havoc wasn't just a problem for the landscape. It had ripple effects on local communities and wildlife. Rivers clogged with sediment disrupted fishing and agricultural activities downstream, leading to conflicts that would have made the Hatfields and McCoys look like a friendly neighborhood disagreement. Native American tribes, already displaced by the influx of settlers, found their traditional lands and resources devastated. It was a harsh reminder that in the pursuit of wealth, the environment was often the first casualty. And speaking of casualties, let's ponder the romanticized image of the lone miner, an independent soul striking it rich in solitude. It's a compelling picture, isn't it? But the truth was far more complex. While rugged individualism makes for a great campfire story, the reality was that mining was often a communal effort. Miners banded together, pooling resources and labor to tackle the monumental task of extracting gold from the earth. It wasn't just the camaraderie that drove this cooperation, it was necessity. Working alone meant slower progress and greater risk, so partnerships and collectives were the order of the day. Take, for example, the concept of mining companies. Yes, even in the gold rush, capitalism found a way to rear its head. These companies were formed by groups of investors who pooled their resources to fund large-scale operations. They hired workers, constructed infrastructure, and used economies of scale to maximize their chances of striking it rich. It was a precursor to the corporate world we know today, where teamwork trumped going solo. And let's not forget about the social fabric that held these communities together. While competition was fierce, there was also a sense of solidarity among miners. They shared tools, tips, and tales, forming bonds that transcended the daily grind. It's a testament to the human spirit, a reminder that even in the harshest conditions, people find ways to connect and support each other. So, as you lay your weary head down for another night under the stars, consider this. The gold rush was as much about the people as it was about the gold. It was a melting pot of cultures, crucible of innovation and determination, and a stage for both the best and worst of human nature. And while the dream of striking it rich may have been the spark that ignited this grand adventure, it was the shared struggle and the pursuit of a better life that truly defined it. Tomorrow, as the sun rises on another day of digging and dreaming, you'll be ready to face whatever challenges come your way. You've got a front row seat to history, and the story is far from over. So, keep your pan at the ready, your claim staked, and your eyes on the horizon. Because in the gold rush, the only certainty is uncertainty, and maybe, just maybe, a little bit of gold. As you brace yourself for another day in the wild, wild west, let's zoom out for the evening's main feature, the broader economic spectacle known as the California Gold Rush. Think of it as the original influencer of the American economy, a 19th century Kardashian, if you will, turning heads and wallets alike. This wasn't just a local phenomenon. It was a seismic event that reshaped the nation from coast to coast and beyond. First up, let's talk infrastructure, a word that might make your eyes glaze over, but trust me, it's more exciting than it sounds. The gold rush was like giving a jolt of caffeine to California's sleepy economy. Imagine this. Before gold fever hit, California was the kind of place where you could hear a pin drop. By the time the feverish crowds descended, the state was scrambling to catch up. Roads were carved into the rugged terrain, Railways snaked across the landscape, and ports expanded faster than a waistline at Thanksgiving. The Transcontinental Railroad, completed in 1869, was the crown jewel of this infrastructural boom. It connected the West Coast to the rest of the United States, slashing travel time from months to mere days. Choo-choo, indeed. And it wasn't just about getting from point A to point B. The gold rush also laid the groundwork for urban growth on a scale that would make even the most ambitious city planners break into a sweat. San Francisco, once a sleepy backwater, transformed into a bustling metropolis almost overnight. From 1848 to 1860, its population ballooned from under 1,000 to over 56,000. That's right, folks. San Francisco was the original boomtown, setting the stage for future cities to rise from the dust like the phoenix from the ashes. Suddenly, there were businesses to run, newspapers to print, and politicians to schmooze, because where there's gold, there's greed. Speaking of politics, let's not forget the golden ticket to statehood, California's entry into the United States in 1850 as the 31st state was no mere coincidence. The gold rush made California a prize too tempting for Uncle Sam to ignore. The rapid influx of settlers and the sudden economic boom forced Washington's hand, and California was admitted to the Union with a speed that puts even express shipping to shame. It was a classic case of supply and demand. California had the supply of gold, and the U.S. had the demand for new territories to control. In the end, it was a match made in capitalist heaven. But hold your horses before you start thinking this was a win-win for everyone involved. As with any great story, there's a not-so-glamorous side lurking beneath the surface. Let's start with the indigenous populations, who found themselves on the wrong side of history's gold rush. The arrival of tens of thousands of miners turned their world upside down. Lands that had been home for generations were overrun by prospectors with a one-track mind. The impact was as devastating as it was swift. By 1870, California's Native American population had plummeted by more than 80%, from 150,000 to about 30,000. It's a sobering reminder that progress often comes at a cost, and not everyone gets to cash in. And then there's the environment, often the unsung casualty of human ambition. The gold rush wasn't just a human tidal wave. It was an ecological disaster waiting to happen. Hydraulic mining, that aforementioned earth-shattering technology, turned rivers into sludge and hillsides into barren wastelands. The Sacramento and San Joaquin rivers, once teeming with life, became clogged with debris, and the effects rippled down to the fertile Central Valley, disrupting agriculture and fisheries. In a cruel twist of irony, the land that promised so much was left scarred and depleted, a cautionary tale of what happens when the scales of greed tip too far. Yet, amidst the chaos and destruction, there's a certain allure to the gold rush that's hard to resist. It's the ultimate underdog story, the American dream distilled into a pan of glittering sediment. The idea that anyone, regardless of their past, could strike it rich and rewrite their future. It's a narrative that still resonates today, a testament to the enduring appeal of risk and reward. Sure, the reality was often brutal and unforgiving, but the dream never died. It just evolved. As you settle in for the night, the campfire casting flickering shadows on the faces around you, it's clear that the gold rush was more than a historical footnote. It was a seismic shift that reshaped the landscape of California and the nation, leaving an indelible mark on history. But don't hang up your pickaxe just yet. There's more to this story, and the best is yet to come. Tomorrow, we'll delve deeper into the lasting legacy of this golden era, exploring how it set the stage for the modern world we know today. So keep your eyes on the horizon and your hopes high, because in the gold rush, the only thing more certain than uncertainty is the promise of a new day. As the embers of the campfire glow like scattered stars against the night sky, it's time to unravel the legacy of the gold rush, a tale that's left its mark deeper than any miner's pick could dig. This wasn't just a moment in time. It was a seismic shift that left footprints on American culture, like a giant stomping through history's sandbox. So, let's dig into the dirt of the past and see what nuggets we can unearth. First up, the gold rush didn't just fill pockets, it filled heads with dreams. It injected a dose of audacious ambition into the American psyche, turning the West into a canvas for reinvention. The myth of the West as a land of endless opportunity took root here, fertilized by the hopes of thousands who risked everything for a shot at wealth. In reality, endless opportunity often meant endless toil. But hey, why let facts get in the way of a good story? This myth has been the foundation for countless tales of grit and glory, where the plucky hero tames the wild frontier armed with nothing but determination and a questionable sense of direction. Now let's not pretend it was all sunsets and saloons. The gold rush was a messy, chaotic affair that reshaped the social and cultural landscape. It was a melting pot, sure, but more like one of those parts in a high school chemistry lab, volatile and prone to explosive reactions. Cultures collided in the goldfields, with a cacophony of languages and customs creating a colorful, if combustible, tapestry. Yet, out of this chaos emerged a uniquely Californian identity, a blend of resilience, innovation, and a dash of defiance. It's no surprise that California became the land of dreams, a place where the impossible seemed just possible enough to chase. Economically speaking, the gold rush was like a turbo boost for the American economy, injecting it with cash and chaos in equal measure. In the decade following the discovery of gold, the U.S. Mint churned out over $200 million in gold coins. That's a lot of shiny metal fueling everything from industrial expansion to the inevitable boom in luxury goods. It's a classic example of trickle-down economics, except the trickle was more like a gold-plated waterfall. The wealth generated helped fund infrastructure projects, education, and even the arts, laying the groundwork for America's rise as an economic powerhouse. But hold onto your hats, because the gold rush also taught us some hard lessons about sustainability, or the lack thereof. It was a cautionary tale of what happens when greed overshadows good sense. The environmental devastation left behind was a stark reminder that nature doesn't forgive easily. The ravaged landscapes and polluted waterways are a testament to the cost of unchecked ambition, a lesson that's all too relevant in today's world of climate change and ecological concerns. It's a reminder that our planet isn't an endless treasure chest, ready to be plundered at will. And let's not gloss over the human cost. The gold rush was a dream for some, but a nightmare for others, especially the Native American populations who were displaced, marginalized, decimated by disease and violence. It's a sobering chapter in American history that highlights the darker side of progress. The pursuit of gold came at a steep price, one that was paid by those who had no say in the matter. It's a reminder that every coin has two sides, and the glitter of gold often hides a shadow. Yet, despite its darker chapters, the gold rush remains an enduring symbol of the American dream. It's a story of reinvention, resilience, and relentless pursuit. It captured the imagination of a nation and continues to resonate today, inspiring everything from Hollywood blockbusters to road trips along the storied trails. The notion that anyone could, with enough grit and determination, carve out a fortune from the unforgiving land is a powerful narrative that speaks to the heart of human ambition. As you lay back and let the night sky swallow your thoughts, consider the dreams and disappointments of those who toiled in the gold fields. They were dreamers and doers, visionaries and vagrants, all chasing the elusive promise of a better life. Some struck it rich, but most found only dust and disillusionment. Yet in their pursuit, they forged a path that others would follow, laying the foundation for the state that would become the beating heart of American innovation and culture. So, as the stars twinkle above like distant nuggets of gold, remember that the legacy of the gold rush is more than just a tale of treasure. It's a story of human nature in all its complexity, of dreams and disappointments, of ambition and avarice. It's a reminder that history is a tapestry woven from both triumphs and tragedies, each thread as vital as the last. And as you drift into the embrace of sleep, let the echoes of the past guide your dreams, whispering tales of a time when the West was wild and the world seemed full of endless possibility. The Minoans were the original Mediterranean influencers, long before anyone was hashtagging their dinner or perfecting the art of the selfie. Around 2000 BCE, while most of Europe was still figuring out how to build a decent hut without it collapsing, the Minoans were busy crafting palaces that could make modern-day architects weep with envy. Take the Palace of Knossos, for example. This sprawling complex, which covered about 150,000 square feet, was a testament to Minoan architectural prowess. It wasn't just big, it was a labyrinthine wonder of corridors and grand rooms that could easily confuse both visitors and, probably, a few of its own residents. But let's not get lost in the allure of fancy stonework just yet. The real kicker is that these Minoans had indoor plumbing while the rest of Europe was still, shall we say, answering nature's call in less sophisticated ways. Yes, they had actual flushing toilets, a feature that would be absent in many European homes until the 19th century. In Minoan Crete, water flowed through terracotta pipes, bringing the luxury of baths and sanitation to the elite. It's a wonder they didn't invent the rubber duck. Now, you might have heard whispers of a certain minotaur lurking in the depths of Knossos. Sure, the legend of a half-man, half-bull creature trapped in a labyrinth is a thrilling tale. But here's the scoop. There's no archaeological evidence that the Minoans were harboring mythical beasts in their basements. The Minotaur story is likely a later Greek invention, an exaggeration of the complexity of Knossos itself. The Minoans did, however, have a thing for bull leaping, a sport where participants would literally vault over bulls. Talk about living on the edge. Beyond their architectural feats and bull-related antics, the Minoans were also masters of trade. Positioned smack dab in the middle of the Mediterranean, Crete was the perfect hub for exchanging goods and ideas. They traded everything from pottery to saffron with Egypt, Syria, and the Greek mainland. This wasn't just a casual barter. It was a full-fledged Mediterranean marketplace with Minoans at the helm, steering their ships across the seas. They were the Amazon prime of the ancient world, minus the 2-day shipping. Economically, this trade network was their lifeline. It provided not only wealth, but also the cultural exchange that fostered the art and technology they are famous for. And while we're on the topic of culture, let's not forget the colorful frescoes adorning Minoan walls. These vibrant paintings captured scenes of daily life, nature, and of course, their beloved bulls. Unlike the later Greeks, who seemed to be obsessed with depicting warfare and guards with six-pack abs, the Minoans focused on the serene and the natural, perhaps a reflection of their relatively peaceful society. Politically, the Minoan civilization was a bit of a mystery. There's no clear evidence of a king like the pharaohs of Egypt or the emperors of Rome. Some suggest they were a theocracy, with priestesses wielding power, while others think they might have had a system of palatial bureaucrats running the show. Whatever the case, it worked well enough to keep them thriving for centuries. And what about the common folk in this Minoan society? Well, while they weren't living in palatial splendor, they did benefit from the prosperity of their civilization. Workers and artisans contributed to the building of these grand structures and the production of trade goods. It's likely that they enjoyed some of the comforts brought by the advanced infrastructure, like those aforementioned plumbing marvels. Of course, all wasn't sunshine and buttercups. The Minoans had their share of challenges, not least of which was the ever-looming threat of natural disasters. Situated on a seismic hotspot, Crete was vulnerable to earthquakes, and the volcanic eruption on the nearby island of Thera, modern-day Santorini, around 1600 BCE, didn't do them any favors. This catastrophic event likely caused tsunamis that wreaked havoc on Minoan coastal settlements, contributing to their eventual decline. So, there you have it, an ancient civilization that was way ahead of its time in so many ways. From their architectural marvels and pioneering plumbing to their savvy trade networks and rich cultural tapestry, the Minoans left a legacy that lingers on, even if it's often overshadowed by myths and legends. So next time you flush your toilet, spare a thought for those Minoan engineers who were flushing away millennia before it became mainstream. Now, let's dive deeper into the economic engine that kept the Minoan civilization humming along like a well-oiled machine. Or should we say, a well-olive-oiled machine. You see, while the Minoans were busy perfecting their plumbing and leaping over bulls, they were also carving out an impressive niche in the ancient world as the Mediterranean's ultimate import-export experts. Picture Crete in the Bronze Age, a buzzing hub of activity where trade was the name of the game, and the Minoans were the undisputed MVPs. First up, let's talk about the Minoan love affair with pottery. These guys weren't just churning out your run-of-the-mill clay parts. They were crafting intricate, beautifully decorated ceramics that were the envy of the ancient world. Minoan pottery was so sought after that it made its way to far-flung corners of the Mediterranean, from the shores of Egypt to the bustling markets of the Levant. This wasn't just Granny's good china. Minoan pottery was the ancient equivalent of owning an iPhone in a world full of flip phones. And they didn't just stop at pottery. Olive oil was another hot commodity, with the Minoans exporting this liquid gold to eager buyers across the sea. You might say they were the original purveyors of gourmet goods, long before anyone was drizzling it over their salad or dipping their artisanal bread. But it wasn't just about the goods themselves. It was about how they got them from point A to point B. Enter the Minoan ships, the unsung heroes of their economic success. These weren't your average dinghies. Minoan ships were the ancient world's equivalent of cargo planes, zipping across the Mediterranean faster than you can say expedited shipping. With a coastline as their playground and a fleet at their disposal, the Minoans established trade routes that stretched across the known world, making them the FedEx of antiquity. Their maritime prowess was unmatched, and it allowed them to foster connections and build relationships with civilizations far and wide. And let's not forget the strategic genius of their geography. Crete's position in the Mediterranean was a trader's dream, smack dab in the middle of everything. They had a front row seat to the action, with easy access to Egypt, the Levant, and the Greek mainland. It's like they were living in the ancient version of a prime beachfront property, with trade winds blowing in their favor. This strategic location wasn't just luck of the draw, it was a critical factor in their rise as a Bronze Age powerhouse. Now, here's where things get interesting. The Minoans weren't just about making a quick buck, or rather, a quick drachma. Their trade networks weren't just economic lifelines. They were cultural superhighways, facilitating the exchange of ideas, art, and technology alongside goods. This cultural exchange enriched Minoan society, infusing it with influences from their trading partners. It's no coincidence that Minoan art and architecture flourished during this period, mirroring the vibrancy of the diverse cultures they interacted with. You could say they were the original cosmopolitans, long before the cocktail was invented. But let's not get too carried away with the romance of it all. The reality was that this economic reliance on trade also came with its share of risks. For all their maritime might, the Minoans were still at the mercy of the elements. A bad storm or a pirate attack could spell disaster for a shipment, and their geographic position made them vulnerable to natural calamities, like that pesky volcanic eruption on Thera we mentioned earlier. This reliance on trade meant that any disruption could have significant repercussions on their economy, and by extension, their society. It's also worth noting that, while the Minoan economy was robust, it wasn't immune to the social hierarchies and inequalities that characterized many ancient civilizations. The benefits of this trade-driven prosperity weren't evenly distributed. While the elite enjoyed luxury goods and the comforts of palatial life, the common folk were the ones doing the heavy lifting, quite literally. Artisans, sailors, and laborers were the backbone of this economic machine, toiling away to produce the goods that fueled Minoan trade. It's a classic tale as old as time, the few reaping the rewards while the many do the legwork. And yet, despite these challenges and inequalities, the Minoans managed to sustain their economic dominance for centuries. Their ability to adapt and innovate in the face of adversity is a testament to their resilience and ingenuity. They were masters of their maritime domain, steering their civilization to new heights with each successful trade venture. While the world around them evolved and shifted, the Minoans sailed on, leaving a legacy that would echo across the ages. So there you have it, a glimpse into the bustling, vibrant world of the Minoan economy. A world where pottery and olive oil were king, ships ruled the waves, and trade was the lifeblood of a civilization. As we continue to unravel the mysteries of the Minoans, remember that beneath the allure of their myths and legends lies a story of real people navigating the complexities of their time with skill and savvy. And who knows, maybe the next time you drizzle olive oil over your salad, you'll think of those ancient traders who first recognized its worth. While you're pondering the culinary origins of your favorite salad dressing, let's pivot to something even more intriguing, the social and political tapestry of Minoan society. Picture this, a civilization where women weren't just relegated to the sidelines, but were front and center, possibly calling the shots. It's as if the Minoans had their own version of Beyoncé, leading the charge in a world dominated by testosterone-fueled narratives. Now, don't get me wrong, this wasn't some utopian feminist paradise, but there's compelling evidence that women wielded considerable influence. Take the frescoes at Knossos, for instance. They don't just depict women lounging around. They're shown participating in rituals, possibly hinting at roles of religious or political significance. There's even speculation about priestesses holding sway over Minoan society. In a world where most civilizations treated women as second-class citizens, the Minoans were flipping the script. Imagine them as the original disruptors, giving new meaning to the phrase girl power. In terms of governance, the Minoans weren't your typical monarchists. Forget about grand coronation ceremonies or power-hungry kings. Instead, they had what some scholars believe to be a theocratic setup. The evidence is as labyrinthine as their palaces. Linear scripts like Linear A, religious iconography, and the absence of kingly tombs suggest a society where divine authority was intertwined with political power. But before you start imagining a council of toga-clad priestesses ruling with divine wisdom, remember that much of this is educated conjecture. The Minoans left us a tantalizing puzzle, with pieces scattered across frescoes, pottery, and the enigmatic ruins of their once great civilization. Now let's contrast this with the Mycenaeans, their mainland neighbors and eventual conquerors. If the Minoans were the peaceful philosophers, the Mycenaeans were the brash warriors crashing the party. While the Minoans were crafting delicate pottery and perfecting the flush, the Mycenaeans were busy fortifying their citadels and sharpening their swords. These guys are the classic jocks to the Minoans' art kids, rolling into town with a more aggressive, hierarchical society centered around a warrior elite. They even borrowed the Minoan script, Linear B, but not without putting their own militaristic spin on it. But what kept the Minoans from collapsing under their own complexity? Religion played a starring role, acting as both glue and guide. The Minoan pantheon was nothing short of a divine soap opera, with gods and goddesses who would make even Zeus raise an eyebrow. From the enigmatic snake goddess, often depicted with serpents coiled around her arms, to the bull god, who seemed to have a fan club dedicated to high-flying acrobatics, the Minoan deities were as colorful as their frescoes. This religious framework wasn't just about keeping the gods happy. It was a crucial element in maintaining social cohesion and legitimizing authority. In a society as complex and interconnected as the Minoans, having a unified religious identity was like having a social media platform that everyone actually agreed on. But let's not romanticize it too much. Underneath the vibrant frescoes and elegant rituals, the reality was that religion also reinforced social hierarchies and kept the status quo intact. The priestesses, while powerful, likely served to maintain a system that benefited the elite. It's a classic case of religion as both a unifying force and a tool of control, a tale as old as civilization itself. As we explore the Minoans further, remember that their story is not just one of myths and legends, but of real people navigating the complexities of their time. They were a sophisticated society with a unique blend of innovation and tradition, peace and power. And while they eventually faded into the annals of history, eclipsed by the very Mycenaeans they might have once inspired, their legacy lingers in every flushing toilet and every olive oil drizzle. So, as we continue to peel back the layers of this fascinating civilization, keep an eye out for those powerful women and divine dramas that shape the Minoan world. They might not have had Instagram to capture their feats, but their influence echoes across the millennia in ways both profound and mundane. As we delve deeper into the Minoans' social dynamics and religious life, let's keep in mind that history is often a tapestry woven with both romance and reality. In the case of the Minoans, it's a tapestry as rich and colorful as any fresco adorning their palace walls. And now, let's take a detour from the vibrant tapestry of Minoan life to a more explosive chapter, literally. Enter the catastrophic volcanic eruption on Thera around 1600 BCE, an event that probably made the Minoans rethink their real estate choices. Imagine the scene. One moment you're enjoying the serene Mediterranean breeze, the next, your coastal city is getting the ancient world's equivalent of a bad Yelp review, complete with ash, quakes, and tsunamis. Thera, which we know today as Santorini, wasn't just any island. It was a ticking time bomb in the Aegean Sea. When it finally blew its top, it wasn't a little puff of smoke. It was like Mother Nature decided to have a full-scale tantrum. The eruption is estimated to have been a VEI 6 or 7, similar in magnitude to the Krakatoa eruption of 1883. That's the kind of blast that can ruin your day, and as it turns out, your civilization. The sheer force sent plumes of ash sky-high, altering climates and blocking out the sun. If you were a Minoan, this wasn't just a bad hair day. It was a cosmic-level catastrophe. Now, let's talk consequences. The immediate aftermath was likely a tsunami that swept across the Aegean like a vengeful Poseidon. The Minoan coastal cities weren't exactly designed to withstand such watery wrath. Imagine being a Minoan trader whose warehouse of precious olive oil gets washed away. It's enough to make you cry into your leftover pithos. Coastal settlements were devastated, their trade networks disrupted. This wasn't just about losing a few ships and cargo. It cut off vital lifelines that had kept the Minoan economy afloat. Without their maritime mojo, the Minoans couldn't just pivot to Plan B. They were already all in on Plan A. But the Thera eruption wasn't just a one-hit wonder. The subsequent climate changes had lingering effects, reducing crop yields and leading to food shortages. Now, if you've ever dealt with hangry crowds at a food festival, you can imagine the social unrest that might have ensued. A society that had thrived on abundance and trade was suddenly scrambling to survive. The Minoans were masters of adaptation, but this was a curveball even they couldn't dodge. And here's where things get even juicier. Some historians speculate that these natural disasters weakened the Minoans just enough to make them vulnerable to outside forces. Enter the Mycenaeans, stage left, who were probably eyeing their neighbors with a mix of envy and opportunism. The Mycenaeans were the ancient world's equivalent of corporate raiders, ready to swoop in and take over. As the Minoans struggled to recover, the Mycenaeans saw their chance to expand their influence, eventually leading to the absorption of Minoan culture into their own. It's a bit like a hostile takeover, but with more bronze swords and fewer spreadsheets. While some argue that the Mycenaeans simply adopted Minoan culture, let's not sugarcoat it. The Minoan civilization, as it was known, began to fade into the annals of history. Their palaces, once bustling centers of power and trade, were abandoned or repurposed. The vibrant frescoes and intricate pottery that had defined their cultural zenith became relics of a bygone era, overshadowed by the more militaristic Mycenaeans. Yet, the Minoan legacy wasn't completely erased. Their influence can be seen in the Mycenaean linear scripts, their art, and even in the religious practices that the Mycenaeans adopted. It's like the Minoans left a cultural blueprint that even their conquerors couldn't resist following. But for the Minoans themselves, the eruption of Thera and the subsequent chain of events were a testament to how Mother Nature could rewrite the script of history in the blink of an eye, or the blink of a volcanic eruption. As we continue to explore the decline of this once great civilization, let's remember that the Minoans weren't just victims of natural disasters and foreign aggression. They were a people who thrived for centuries, leaving a legacy that still echoes in the art, architecture, and mythology of the Mediterranean. Their story is a reminder of the fragility of human achievements in the face of nature's unpredictability. And as we delve further into the mysteries of their rise and fall, let's keep in mind that history is a complex tapestry, woven with threads of both triumph and tragedy. The Minoans may have been undone by forces beyond their control, but their impact on the world endures, a testament to the resilience and creativity of a civilization that dared to dream big. So, as we wrap our minds around the seismic shifts that spelled the end of the Minoan era, let's turn our gaze to the next chapter, where we'll explore how their cultural DNA continued to influence the Mediterranean long after their palaces crumbled. Stay tuned, because the story of the Minoans is far from over. It's just getting started. The story of the Minoans, much like their labyrinthine palaces, is a winding journey through time, full of twists and turns that have left a lasting imprint on the world. Even as their civilization crumbled, their cultural footprints have danced across history, leaving traces in places you might not expect, like the story of Theseus and the Minotaur. This myth, with its thrilling tale of heroism and monsters, likely originated from the Greeks, who were inspired by the labyrinthine complexity of Minoan architecture. But let's be real, the Minotaur is more fiction than fact. Yet, it's a testament to how the Minoans' legacy was so captivating that the Greeks couldn't resist spinning elaborate tales around it. And then there's Atlantis, the legendary city that supposedly sank into the sea, taking with it untold riches and secrets. While Plato's story of Atlantis is a philosophical allegory rather than a historical account, some speculate that the myth was inspired by the Minoan civilization and its sudden fall. The eruption of Thera and subsequent devastation could very well have sparked tales of a once great society swallowed by the sea. It's a romantic notion, isn't it? A sunken city, lost to time, igniting imaginations for millennia. But alas, the reality is probably less about mystical cities vanishing overnight and more about tectonic plates and volcanic ash. Despite their real-world demise, the Minoans' influence didn't sink with them. Their art, with its vibrant frescoes and delicate pottery, continues to captivate archaeologists and tourists alike. Those frescoes, depicting everything from nature to religious rituals, offer a window into a society that prized beauty and tranquility. The colors might be faded, but the artistry remains a testament to their sophisticated culture. And let's not forget their architecture, which has inspired countless designs throughout history. The Minoan knack for building multi-storied complexes with intricate plumbing systems was a marvel that still puzzles modern architects. Imagine wandering through the ruins of Knossos, trying to piece together how they managed to engineer such wonders without the aid of modern technology. But it's not all about aesthetics. The Minoans were also cultural trailblazers. Their trade networks, which sprawled across the Mediterranean, weren't just about exchanging goods. They were conduits for ideas and innovations. They were the original cultural influencers, spreading their artistic styles and technological advancements far and wide. The Mycenaeans, their eventual conquerors, adopted much from the Minoans, incorporating elements of their art and religion into their own culture. It's a bit like cultural osmosis, where even after being absorbed, the essence of the Minoans continued to permeate through their successors. So, what can we learn from the Minoans? Beyond the dazzling frescoes and mythical beasts, their story is one of resilience and adaptation. They thrived for centuries in a world where natural disasters were as common as olive oil, and they managed to create a society that was both advanced and interconnected. Their ability to adapt to their environment and harness it for trade and cultural exchange was key to their success. Even when faced with catastrophic events like the Thera eruption, they demonstrated remarkable resilience. Sure, they couldn't prevent the eventual decline, but their capacity to endure and innovate left an indelible mark on history. In a world where change is the only constant, the Minoans remind us of the importance of adaptability. Their civilization was shaped by the forces of nature and the currents of trade, and they navigated this dynamic landscape with ingenuity. They show us that while we might not be able to control the whims of an angry volcano, we can certainly shape how we respond to such challenges. The Minoans' legacy is a testament to human creativity and resilience, qualities that remain as relevant today as they were in the Bronze Age. As we look back at the Minoans, it's clear that their story is more than just a chapter in ancient history. It's a lesson in embracing change, celebrating innovation, and recognizing the power of cultural exchange. Even as their civilization faded, their influence endured, weaving its way through the fabric of Western culture. So next time you find yourself marveling at a piece of ancient Cretan pottery or pondering the origins of a myth, remember the Minoans, the original Mediterranean maestros, whose echoes still resonate in our world today. They may have vanished from the physical world, but their legacy continues to inspire and intrigue, a reminder that even in the face of disaster, creativity and resilience can leave a lasting mark. It was a truth universally acknowledged, though not often spoken aloud, that Ada Lovelace was destined for an unusual life. Born on December 10, 1815, to Lord Byron, the rock star of the Romantic poets, before rock stars were even a thing, and Annabella Milbank, a woman with a brain that could slice through algebra like a heart knife through butter, Ada was practically programmed for paradox from the get-go. Lord Byron, who could pen a sonnet that would make you weep, while simultaneously causing a scandal that would make your grandmother clutch her pearls, wasn't exactly the poster child for stable family life. He was the kind of guy who could make a Regency-era gossip column blow up, and not in a good way. Ada's mom, Annabella, was no wilting violet either. Known as the Princess of Parallelograms for her mathematical prowess, she was determined that her daughter wouldn't inherit Byron's penchant for poetic drama. Nope, Annabella had a plan. She would balance out the Byron blood with a rigorous education in mathematics and science. Forget the quill and ink. Ada was getting a compass and abacus. Annabella was so committed to this plan that she hired the best tutors money could buy, and given that we're talking early 19th century England, that was quite a few shillings. Speaking of England, let's set the stage. The year is 1815, and the world is just catching its breath after the Napoleonic Wars. Britain is starting its Industrial Revolution victory lap. Steam engines are the new black, and carton mills are popping up like dandelions in spring. The social hierarchy is as rigid as a corset, but the winds of change are beginning to stir, albeit slowly. In this world, the word computer referred to a person, usually a woman, who performed calculations. It was a far cry from the silicon-based gadgets we can't live without today, but it was the seed of something that would one day grow into a technological colossus. Ada's upbringing was a cocktail of privilege, prestige, and pressure. Byron left when she was just a month old, fleeing to the continent amidst a cloud of rumors and unpaid debts. He would never return, dying in Greece when Ada was 8. While he gallivanted across Europe, Ada was left to grow up in a society that was both fascinated and horrified by her father's legacy. Annabella made sure Ada was insulated from Byron's more colorful influences, steering her clear of poetry and into the welcoming arms of mathematics and logic. But let's not pretend that Annabella's plan was smooth sailing. Ada was often ill, her health as tempestuous as her father's reputation. By the age of 8, Ada had survived a bout of measles that left her temporarily paralyzed. Yet she was nothing if not determined, perhaps a little Byron in her after all. During her recovery, she designed a set of wings, convinced that she could create a flying machine. This was a time when most 8-year-olds were content with a kite, but Ada was already aiming for the sky. Quite literally. Annabella's educational regimen was as relentless as a Victorian headmaster's cane. Ada was tutored in mathematics and science, a rarity for a woman of her time, and she had to endure relentless drills in French, music, and geography. There was a method to this mathematical madness. Annabella was determined that Ada would not succumb to the Byronic temperament. Whether this was nature or nurture at work is a question for the ages, but one thing's for sure. Ada's upbringing was a calculated risk, pun absolutely intended. In the social whirl of early 19th century England, where the balls were as frequent as the gossip, Ada was an anomaly. She was a woman who could discuss calculus as easily as she could cut a rug at Almack's. She moved in circles that included some of the most brilliant minds of her time, thanks to her mother's connections. These weren't just any afternoon tea guests. We're talking about heavyweights like Charles Babbage, the man who would go on to conceive the first mechanical computer. Let's pause here for a moment of gratitude for Annabella's foresight. In a world where women were often seen and not heard, where their primary roles were to marry well and produce heirs, Annabella made sure Ada was equipped with the tools to break that mold. Ada was a woman in a man's world, a computer in a universe where that term hadn't even been coined. Her education was an act of rebellion wrapped in the guise of propriety, a silent protest against the limits of her gender. Ada's early life was a dizzying blend of privilege and pressure, a balancing act between the legacy of a father whose shadow loomed large and a mother determined to see her daughter rise above it. It was a life that set the stage for greatness, though not without its fair share of obstacles and oddities. In a world on the cusp of the modern age, Ada Lovelace was already programming her future, one equation at a time, in the language of logic and numbers. And as history would have it, that future would be nothing short of extraordinary. In the swirling social whirl of early 19th century England, where the societal norms were as rigid as a starched cravat, Ada Lovelace wasn't just another debutante waiting for her dance card to fill. No, she was the mathematical prodigy who managed to squeeze in calculus between cotillions. Enter Charles Babbage, a man whose brain was practically fizzing with ideas about mechanical computation. Picture this: Babbage, the gruff visionary with a penchant for machines, and Ada, the imaginative mathematician with an eye for the future. Together, they were an odd couple of the intellectual variety, something akin to a Victorian-era tech startup. Babbage had already gained a reputation for his work on the difference engine, a mechanical calculator that was supposed to make human computers obsolete. But like many grand plans, it stumbled over the mundane obstacle of funding. The British government, which had initially backed the project with £17,000, a king's ransom back then, started getting cold feet as the costs ballooned faster than a souffle in a hot oven. By 1842, the project was shelved, leaving Babbage with little more than a pile of incomplete parts and a head full of unfulfilled dreams. Enter the analytical engine, Babbage's next brainchild, a machine that would make his earlier inventions look like mere abacuses. This wasn't just about crunching numbers. Babbage envisioned a marvel that could perform any calculation given the right instructions, a true general-purpose computer, long before such a concept existed. But Babbage's brusque demeanor and penchant for offending potential patrons were hardly conducive to drumming up the financial support needed for such an ambitious venture. If only he had linked in back then. And that's where Ada Lovelace came in, not merely as a supporter, but as a collaborator. She saw beyond the tangled mess of gears and levers, recognizing the potential for Babbage's machine to transcend mere number crunching. During the summer of 1843, while the British aristocracy was busy with their usual pastimes of fox hunting and gossiping, Ada was rolling up her sleeves and diving into Luigi Federico Menebria's article on the analytical engine. Menebria, an Italian engineer, had written a piece in French that explained the machine's potential, but Ada wasn't content with a mere translation. She expanded upon it, adding her own notes that would take up 3 times the original text. Talk about value-added content. In these notes, Ada did something revolutionary. She wrote what is now considered the first algorithm intended for a machine. This wasn't just a simple set of instructions. It was an elaborate plan for the analytical engine to compute Bernoulli numbers, a feat as complex as it was visionary. Ada's insight was in realizing that the machine's potential extended far beyond arithmetic. She famously suggested that, given the right inputs, the analytical engine could compose music. Yes, music. While the Victorians were still mastering the art of the waltz, Ada was contemplating computer-generated symphonies. Their collaboration was not without its hiccups. Babbage, despite his brilliance, could be as prickly as a hedgehog in a teacup. His correspondence with Ada often resembled a roller coaster ride, with enthusiastic highs and frustrated lows. Yet Ada's admiration for Babbage's work was unwavering, even when his gruffness grated on her nerves. In one letter, she admonished him for failing to communicate with potential financial backers. She had the social acumen that Babbage lacked, understanding that a bit of charm could go a long way in loosening the purse strings of the aristocracy. But Ada's own financial situation was far from secure. Her husband, William Kingnall, the Earl of Lovelace, was supportive but not particularly wealthy. The Lovelace estate, though grand, was more style than substance. Ada's fascination with mathematics and science wasn't exactly the ticket to financial independence, especially in a society where the currency of a woman's worth was often measured in dowries and connections rather than intellectual accomplishments. The funding challenges for Babbage's machine were a constant thorn in their side. The British government, having already been burned by the difference engine debacle, wasn't keen on throwing more money into what many saw as a fanciful project. Private investors were equally skeptical, preferring the tangible returns of railways and factories to the speculative promise of a mechanical brain. Yet, for all their setbacks, collaboration between Ada and Babbage was a meeting of minds that transcended the limitations of their era. It was a partnership forged in intellect and imagination, a precursor to the tech partnerships that would shape the future. Ada wasn't just a footnote in Babbage's story. She was a co-author in the narrative of computational history. As Ada penned her notes, she was acutely aware of the societal limitations imposed upon her, but she was determined to push against them. In a letter to Babbage, she mused on her desire to create a new, a vast, and a powerful language for the analytical engine. It was an ambition as audacious as it was prescient, a glimpse into a future where software would become the lingua franca of the modern world. Ada's work on Menebria's article and her notes on the analytical engine were published in 1843 in an English scientific journal, the the tailor's scientific memoirs. The paper was a revelation, though it didn't exactly set the world on fire at the time. Like many visionaries, Ada was ahead of her time, her genius recognized only in hindsight. Her work laid the groundwork for the field of computer science, a discipline that wouldn't even be named until the mid-20th century. The partnership between Ada Lovelace and Charles Babbage was a remarkable chapter in the annals of history, a testament to what can be accomplished when vision meets veracity. It was a collaboration marked by intellectual synergy and mutual respect, despite the challenges they faced. Their story didn't end with the publication of Ada's notes, but rather, it set the stage for future developments in computing. As we leave Ada and Babbage at this juncture, their journey is far from over. The analytical engine remains a blueprint, a dream yet to be realized, but Ada's notes have planted the seeds of a revolution, one that will eventually transform the world in ways she could only begin to imagine. So, hold onto your hats. The story of Ada Lovelace and her pioneering role in computer science isn't finished yet. There's more to come, and it's every bit as fascinating as the tale we've just begun to unfold. So, Ada Lovelace's notes on Charles Babbage's analytical engine were off to a solid start. But let's not kid ourselves. Victorian England wasn't exactly rolling out the red carpet for women in science. It was a time when the idea of a woman being intellectually equal to a man was as foreign as the concept of a smartphone. Women, bless their corseted souls, were generally expected to focus on home, hearth, and husband hunting. The scientific community was a gentleman's club, and the sign on the door read, "No girls allowed," albeit in fancier Victorian lettering. But Ada, she was having none of that. She was navigating this male-dominated landscape like a chess master, moving her pieces strategically. It's no wonder she was dubbed the Enchantress of Numbers by Babbage himself. Ada's ability to see the potential in Babbage's machine went beyond the mathematical. It was philosophical, almost prophetic. She proposed that the analytical engine could compute anything that could be expressed in symbolic logic, a notion that hinted at the modern concept of a computer as a universal machine. Yet, let's not romanticize her journey too much. Ada wasn't just battling societal norms. She was also grappling with her own personal demons. Her health was as precarious as her societal position, from chronic illnesses that kept her bedridden for long stretches to debilitating migraines that could make a grown man weep. Ada's physical struggles were a constant companion. But she persevered, often writing her most insightful work while confined to her bed. And then there was her penchant for what she called mathematical experiments, which sounds way more sophisticated than it was: gambling. Ada had a weakness for high-stakes bets, and let's just say her luck at the tables didn't match her genius with numbers. She approached gambling with the same analytical rigor she applied to mathematics, convinced she could devise a winning formula. Spoiler alert, she couldn't. In 1851, she attempted to apply her mathematical prowess to horse racing, hoping to develop a surefire system for picking winners. Instead, she ended up nearly bankrupting her family and having to confess her debts to her husband, William Kingnall. This gambling escapade is often glossed over in the legend of Ada Lovelace, but it's a fascinating glimpse into her character. Here was a woman who saw the world through numbers, who believed in the power of logic and calculation, yet was human enough to be lured by the siren call of chance. It's a reminder that even the brightest minds can be led astray by folly. Ada's attempts to crack the code of the racetrack were, in her own words, an experiment in the laws of probability, though the bookies probably just called it Tuesday. Meanwhile, the broader world of Victorian England was undergoing seismic shifts. The Industrial Revolution was in full swing, transforming the landscape both literally and metaphorically. Steam power was king, and factories were sprouting up faster than you could say Luddite. The economy was booming, but it was a double-edged sword. For every new innovation that improved life, there was a social upheaval that threatened to unravel it. The gap between the wealthy and the working class was growing wider, and the sense of order that had defined British society was beginning to fray. In this environment, Ada's work took on a greater significance. Her insights into the analytical engine weren't just about technology. They were about the potential for technology to reshape society. The notion that a machine could perform tasks previously reserved for human intellect was as revolutionary as it was unsettling. It challenged the status quo and hinted at a future where the line between human and machine would blur. In many ways, Ada was a woman out of time, her vision of the future clashing with the realities of her present. The societal perception of women like Ada was a complex tapestry of admiration and skepticism. On one hand, her achievements were acknowledged by a select few in the scientific community. On the other, the broader public was more interested in her as a curiosity than a colleague. She was like a comet blazing across the night sky, dazzling, enigmatic, and ultimately fleeting. Ada was aware of this dichotomy and often expressed frustration at the limitations imposed upon her by her gender. Yet, she continued to push against these barriers, determined to carve out a space for women in the annals of scientific history. Ada's life was a balancing act between her intellectual pursuits and the societal expectations of a Victorian lady. While she was penning algorithms and pondering the future of computing, she also had to navigate the rigid social hierarchies of her time. Her marriage to William Kingnall was as much a partnership as it was a traditional union. William supported Ada's intellectual endeavors, but he was also a product of his time, and their relationship was not immune to the pressures of societal norms. In the end, Ada Lovelace's story is one of contradiction and complexity, a narrative that defies easy categorization. She was a pioneer in a world that wasn't ready for pioneers, a woman of intellect in an age that prized appearances over achievements. Her legacy is a testament to the power of vision and perseverance, a reminder that the greatest revolutions often begin with a single, audacious idea. As we leave Ada at this juncture, her story is far from over. The analytical engine remains a tantalizing possibility, a dream yet to be realized. But Ada's notes have planted the seeds of a revolution, one that will eventually transform the world in ways she could only begin to imagine. So, hold onto your hats. The story of Ada Lovelace and her pioneering role in computer science isn't finished yet. There's more to come, and it's every bit as fascinating as the tale we've just begun to unfold. Now, you might think that Ada's groundbreaking work instantly catapulted her into the limelight, cementing her status as the mother of computer science. But remember, this was Victorian England, where women's accomplishments were often hidden behind the heavy drapery of societal norms. Ada's notes on the analytical engine were published in 1843, but they didn't exactly have the scientific community scrambling to build mechanical computers. Nope, the response was more akin to a polite golf clap than standing ovation. Let's dive into the why of it. Society at the time wasn't just a boys' club. It was more like a fortress guarded by gatekeepers with very specific ideas about gender roles. Women were expected to be seen and not heard, their intellects confined to the drawing room rather than the laboratory. Ada's genius was like a diamond hidden in plain sight, sparkling but largely unappreciated by those who preferred the status quo. In fact, Ada's contributions were overshadowed for decades, buried under the weight of gender biases that saw her as little more than Babbage's helpful assistant. It wasn't until the 1950, over a century later, that historians began to unearth her legacy. In a twist of historical irony, it took the advent of modern computing, an industry Ada had, in many ways, foreseen, to finally give her the recognition she deserved. Now, let's talk myths. One of the most pervasive is the idea that Ada was a solitary genius who single-handedly invented computer programming. While her contributions were undeniably pivotal, she wasn't working in a vacuum. Her insights were part of a broader dialogue with contemporaries like Babbage, and her work built on the foundations laid by others. The romance of the lone genius is appealing, sure, but reality is rarely so straightforward. Another myth paints Ada as a tragic figure, a brilliant mind undone by her own hubris. This narrative sells papers, or these days clicks, but it glosses over the systemic challenges she faced. Yes, she was ambitious and occasionally overreached. Hello, gambling debts. But she was also navigating a world that wasn't ready for her kind of brilliance. It's a bit like blaming a fish for not thriving on land. Despite these myths, the allure of Ada's story endures. She's become a symbol of what women can achieve in the face of adversity, a beacon for future generations of female scientists and engineers. Her story is one of resilience and vision, a narrative that resonates in a world still grappling with gender inequality in STEM fields. Fast forward to the 20th century, and Ada's legacy began to take root. Her notes became a touchstone for computer scientists looking to understand the origins of their field. The idea of a machine that could execute any given set of instructions, what we now call a Turing-complete machine, was revolutionary, and Ada had glimpsed it a full century before Alan Turing formalized the concept. In 1980, the U.S. Department of Defense named a new programming language, Ada, in her honor, a nod to her pioneering work. It's a fitting tribute, considering the language's emphasis on reliability and efficiency, qualities Ada herself valued. The Ada programming language is still in use today, particularly in systems where safety and precision are paramount, like aviation and medical devices. But let's not forget the economic context of Ada's time. The Industrial Revolution was a double-edged sword, creating wealth for some while leaving others behind. Factories were springing up like mushrooms after a rainstorm, yet the technological innovations that would eventually sprout from Ada's seeds were still decades away. It's a reminder that revolutions, whether industrial or digital, are rarely linear. They zigzag through history, shaped by economic forces and human ambition. Ada's ability to see potential where others saw only problems was a superpower. She envisioned a future where machines could handle tasks as complex as composing music, an idea as audacious as it was ahead of its time. Her work laid the groundwork for the digital age, even if its true impact wouldn't be felt for generations. And let's talk about influence. Ada's story has inspired countless women to pursue careers in science and technology, a field still struggling with gender imbalance. Organizations like the Ada Initiative, founded in 2011, work to support women in open technology and culture, carrying forward the torch she lit. It's a testament to her enduring impact that her name is synonymous with female empowerment in tech. Yet, even as we celebrate her legacy, it's crucial to remember the broader context. Ada Lovelace was a product of her time, a woman whose brilliance was both a gift and a burden. Her life was a balancing act between societal expectations and personal ambition, a dance on the edge of a precipice that could have swallowed her whole. So, where does this leave us? Ada's legacy is one of both myth and reality, a tale that defies simple categorization. She's a symbol of what could be, the embodiment of potential realized against the odds. Her story is a reminder that progress is often a messy affair, full of starts and stops, triumphs and setbacks. As we continue to explore Ada's impact, let's keep in mind that her story is far from over. The seeds she planted have grown into a forest of technological innovation, and her influence continues to ripple through the corridors of computing history. So stay tuned, because there's more to this tale, and it's just as captivating as the chapters we've already unfurled. And so we find ourselves at the threshold of Ada Lovelace's enduring legacy, a tale straddling both the romantic and the realistic, a narrative that hooks you with its audacity and keeps you with its depth. While Ada's work didn't quite rock the Victorian scientific establishment like a thunderbolt, its ripples have grown into waves that continue to lap at the shores of modern science and technology. Let's dive into how her story has evolved from a historical footnote to a vibrant symbol of potential and perseverance. Fast forward to today, and Ada Lovelace's name carries a resonance that echoes through the halls of universities and tech firms alike. Ada Lovelace Day, celebrated on the second Tuesday of October, is a global festivity dedicated to recognizing the achievements of women in STEM. It's like a rock concert for the brainy, highlighting the accomplishments of female pioneers who dared to defy the norms. This day serves as both a celebration and a call to action, urging us to break down barriers and nurture talent in every corner of the scientific world. It's a testament to how Ada, with her Victorian algorithms and visionary insight, blazed a trail that countless women now walk. Yet, let's not get too starry-eyed. Ada's story isn't just a tale of triumph. It's a reminder of how hard-won these victories can be. Her life is a cautionary tale about the tantalizing allure of intellect and the societal pitfalls that can ensnare even the brightest minds. Ada's gamble with mathematics and her own health was a dance on the edge of reason, a reminder that brilliance often comes with its own set of risks. But why does Ada's story still resonate? In a world where technology moves faster than a caffeine-fueled coder at a hackathon, why does a woman from the 19th century still capture our imagination? The answer lies in her ability to see beyond the constraints of her era, to envision a future where machines could perform tasks limited only by our imagination. Ada's work laid the groundwork for the digital age, and her insights into symbolic logic were the precursors to the binary language that underpins our modern world. Historically, Ada's contributions were like a buried treasure chest, waiting to be discovered by future generations. Her notes on the analytical engine weren't just scribbles on paper. They were seeds of innovation, planted in a time when few could appreciate their potential. It's fitting, then, that as the digital age dawned, her legacy was dusted off and given the recognition it deserved. Her work became a cornerstone for computer science, influencing thinkers like Alan Turing, who famously cracked the Enigma code and formalized concepts that Ada had intuitively grasped a century earlier. In the realm of economics, Ada's story also serves as a beacon. Her life unfolded during the Industrial Revolution, an era of unparalleled technological and economic upheaval. This was a time when the gap between rich and poor was as wide as the Thames, and yet Ada's work hinted at a future where technology could be a great equalizer. Today, as we grapple with the implications of artificial intelligence and automation, Ada's insights remind us of the power of technology to both divide and unite, to create wealth and challenge societal norms. Ada's legacy also challenges us to rethink the narrative of the lone genius. While her work was pioneering, it was part of a broader tapestry of innovation woven by many hands. She collaborated with Babbage and drew on the ideas of her contemporaries, proving that even the most brilliant minds benefit from a little help from their friends. In today's interconnected world, her story is a reminder that collaboration, not isolation, drives progress. But let's not sugarcoat it. Ada's life wasn't all algorithms and accolations. She faced societal and personal challenges that would make most modern-day hustlers break into a cold sweat. Her health was a constant battle, a reminder that even the most formidable intellects are housed in fragile vessels. And her foray into gambling, while an intriguing subplot, serves as a caution about the perils of hubris and the limits of logic in a world governed by chance. Today, as we celebrate Ada Lovelace Day and honor her contributions to STEM, we also acknowledge the work still to be done. Women in science and technology continue to face challenges that Ada herself would recognize: gender bias, societal expectations, and the constant balancing act between personal ambition and external limitations. Yet, her story inspires a new generation to challenge these barriers, to forge paths where none existed before. As we draw this narrative to a close, let's reflect on the dual nature of Ada's legacy. Her life was a beacon of possibility, a testament to the power of vision and perseverance. Yet, it was also a cautionary tale, a reminder that genius is often accompanied by its own set of challenges. Ada's story is a microcosm of the human experience, a narrative rich with triumph and tragedy, potential and pitfalls. In a world where technology is both a tool and a threat, Ada's insights remain as relevant as ever. Her vision of a future where machines enhance human potential rather than replace it is a guiding star for those navigating the complexities of the digital age. And as we continue to celebrate her legacy, we do so with the understanding that her story is not just a chapter in the annals of history, but a living testament to the power of imagination and the enduring impact of a single, audacious idea. So, as you put this tale to rest, remember that Ada Lovelace was more than just the first computer programmer. She was a pioneer in every sense of the word, a woman who dared to dream beyond the constraints of her time. Her story is a reminder that the seeds of innovation are often planted in the most unlikely of places, and that the legacy of those who dare to dream can transcend the boundaries of history itself. And with that, dear listener, we close the chapter on Ada Lovelace, leaving you with a story as rich and complex as the equations she once pondered. In the scorching heart of the Arabian desert, long before anyone ever thought of air conditioning or the genius idea of a cold frappuccino, the Nabataeans were busy building an empire that would make even today's billionaires look like amateurs. These guys were the original hustlers of the ancient world, turning sand into gold by mastering the art of survival and trade. They didn't have TikTok to go viral, but they sure knew how to make a splash with some serious architectural and economic wizardry. The Nabataeans, a group you might not have heard of, unless you're a history aficionado or a fan of Indiana Jones and The Last Crusade. Because yes, Petra was their handiwork, emerged around the 4th century BCE. They were the kind of people who turned adversity into opportunity. Who needs lush landscapes when you can have a kingdom amid rocks and sand, right? While most would see a barren desert and think, time to relocate, the Nabataeans saw a blank canvas. Their secret source, strategic positioning along trade routes that stretched from the Arabian Peninsula to the Mediterranean. Think of them as the Jeff Bezos of ancient spice and incense trading, except without the Amazon Prime 2-day shipping. By the 1st century BCE, these desert entrepreneurs had built a commercial empire that was as intricate as their rock-cut architecture. They controlled trade routes that were the ancient equivalent of the Silk Road, dealing in frankincense, myrrh, and spices that were more precious than gold at the time. And let's not forget bitumen. Yes, the sticky stuff used for mummification, which they exported to Egypt. Imagine being the go-to supplier for embalming pharaohs. That's one way to leave a legacy. Now, you might be wondering how they managed to thrive in a desert where the idea of no service isn't just about Wi-Fi, but water as well. Simply put, they were water management wizards. The Nabataeans engineered an impressive system of cisterns, aqueducts, and dams to capture and store rainwater. They anticipated the rainfall like modern people anticipate the release of the latest smartphone. Their ingenuity meant they could sustain large populations in places where others would have perished. The Nabataeans didn't just stop at water management. They were innovators in agriculture, too. In an environment where most plants looked at the rocky soil and said, "Nah, I'm good," the Nabataeans coaxed crops into growing. They terraced hillsides and developed irrigation techniques to make the desert bloom. You could say they were the original green thumbs, but with more sand and less loamy soil. Aside from their clever use of natural resources, the Nabataeans were political savants. They played the geopolitical game with finesse, forming strategic alliances with the big powers of the time, including the Romans. When you're a small kingdom sandwiched between empires, you learn quickly that sometimes it's better to be a savvy partner than a stubborn rival. The Nabataeans didn't have an army the size of Genghis Khan's, but they knew how to pick their battles and their friends wisely. But let's address the myth of the Nabataeans as mysterious desert nomads. Sure, they started as Bedouins, but by their peak, they were as cosmopolitan as it got. Petra, their capital, was a melting pot of cultures, languages, and religions. It was a city where you could hear Aramaic, Greek, and Latin echoing through the canyons, and where temples dedicated to Arabian gods stood alongside those for Greek deities. They may have been isolated geographically, but they were anything but culturally isolated. Now, about Petra, this isn't your run-of-the-mill ancient city. It's a place that seems like it was carved by the gods themselves, with its rose-red cliffs and temples that rise majestically from the rock face. But before you get too swept away by the romance of it all, let's remember that this was also a city of practical purpose. Petra wasn't built as a tourist attraction. It was a bustling center of trade and commerce, a crossroads of the ancient world. Its strategic location allowed Nabataeans to levy taxes on caravans passing through, filling their coffers with wealth and power. And while Petra might steal the spotlight, the Nabataeans' architectural prowess wasn't limited to just one city. They left their mark across the region with a network of fortresses, roads, and outposts that facilitated trade and protected their interests. These weren't just stone structures. Each was a testament to their understanding of the landscape and their ability to adapt and innovate. So next time you're thinking about how to make lemonade out of lemons, remember the Nabataeans. They didn't just make lemonade. They built a lemonade empire in the middle of a desert. They were a testament to human ingenuity and adaptability, showing that even in the harshest conditions, greatness can flourish with a bit of clever thinking and a lot of grit. In the grand tapestry of history, the Nabataeans might be a thread often overlooked, but they are one that adds a vibrant hue to the story of human civilization. Stay tuned, because this is just the beginning of our journey into the architectural marvels of the Nabataeans. We've only scratched the surface of what these ancients were capable of. So, buckle up, because we're about to dive deeper into a world where rocks tell stories and every stone is a testament to the brilliance of the people who transformed a desert into a thriving kingdom. As we delve deeper into the world of the Nabataeans, we find ourselves standing in awe under the towering grandeur of Petra's rock-carved facades. This desert gem wasn't just an architectural flex. It was a masterclass in urban planning and resourcefulness. Imagine this, a city meticulously etched into the rose-red sandstone cliffs, emerging from the desert like a mirage. But here's the kicker. It's not just some ancient art project left behind for archaeology students and Hollywood filmmakers to fawn over. Petra was a hub of practicality and ingenuity, a testament to the Nabataeans' flair for combining beauty with utility. Let's get into the nitty-gritty of their construction techniques, shall we? The Nabataeans were no strangers to limestone and sandstone, materials as plentiful in the region as celebrity scandals are today. Instead of stacking stones like a game of ancient Jenga, they opted for a more sophisticated approach, rock-cut architecture. Picture artists chiseling away at the cliffs, not unlike sculptors shaping marble into masterpieces. The Nabataeans didn't just carve, they orchestrated a symphony of stone, transforming raw rock into a canvas for their architectural vision. And let's not overlook the tools of the trade: iron chisels, hammers, and pickaxes, all wielded with the precision of a surgeon. Now, before you start romanticizing the whole process, let's sprinkle in some reality. This wasn't a leisurely weekend hobby. It was back-breaking labor. Imagine standing under the relentless desert sun, chipping away at a cliff with nothing more than muscle and metal. It took decades, sometimes centuries, to complete these structures. Laborers, likely a mix of slaves and skilled workers, toiled day in and day out to bring the Nabataean dreams to life. Not quite the glamorous lifestyle Instagram influencers would sign up for, but it was effective. And then there's the engineering marvel that is Petra's water management system, a feature as essential as Wi-Fi is to a modern cafe. The Nabataeans crafted an intricate network of channels, pipes, and cisterns, turning the unforgiving desert into a veritable oasis. They didn't just wait for rain like farmers praying for a good harvest. They harnessed every drop, directing water through gravity-fed channels that snaked around the city. Cisterns carved deep into the rock stored this precious resource, ensuring a steady supply even during the driest months. Talk about foresight that would make even the most seasoned city planner raise an eyebrow. But Petra wasn't solely about surviving the elements. It was about thriving in them. The city's layout was a masterstroke of urban design, with structures strategically positioned to maximize both sunlight and shade. The treasury, perhaps Petra's most iconic monument, wasn't just a pretty face. It was likely a royal tomb or a temple, demonstrating the Nabataeans' knack for blending the sacred with the practical. And let's not forget the grand amphitheater, carved to seat 4,000 spectators. Yes, even in the desert, the Nabataeans understood the need for entertainment, proving that humans have always loved a good show, whether it's Gladiators or Netflix. Economics played a starring role in Petra's story too. Situated at the crossroads of trade routes, Petra was a bustling marketplace where merchants haggled over everything from spices to textiles. The Nabataeans, ever the savvy entrepreneurs, imposed taxes on passing caravans, transforming their city into a financial powerhouse. It's a classic move: control the trade, control the wealth. The revenue generated funded their architectural pursuits, allowing them to continuously expand their cityscape. Now, let's address the elephant in the room, the myth of Petra as some sort of lost city. Sure, it was hidden from Western eyes until Swiss explorer Johann Ludwig Burckhardt stumbled upon it in 1812. But to the locals and traders of the time, Petra was as lost as New York City is today. The lost city narrative might sell tickets and spark imaginations, but it's a bit of a misnomer. Petra was never really lost. It was simply living its best life in the desert, minding its own business. And while we're debunking myths, let's talk about the Nabataeans themselves. Often painted as enigmatic nomads, the reality is that they were sophisticated urbanites by the height of their civilization. They had a penchant for luxury, importing fine goods from across the ancient world. Greek-style columns adorned their buildings, while the influence of Egyptian and Mesopotamian art echoed through their sculptures. This blending of styles wasn't just for aesthetic purposes. It was a reflection of their cosmopolitan society, a melting pot of cultures that thrived in the heart of the desert. In essence, Petra was more than a city. It was a statement. A defiant proclamation that the desert, with all its challenges, could be tamed and transformed into a center of culture and commerce. The Nabataeans didn't just build with stone. They carved out a legacy, etching their story into the very fabric of the cliffs. They remind us that greatness often arises from the most unlikely of places, and that with a little grit and a lot of ingenuity, even the harshest environments can become havens of human achievement. As we continue to unravel the mysteries of the Nabataeans, remember this. Every stone in Petra holds a story, a whisper of the past waiting to be heard. We're just getting started on this journey through time and sandstone, so stay tuned as we explore more of what made the Nabataeans the true architects of the desert. So, as we continue our stroll through Petra, it's time to dive headfirst into the glitzy myths versus the gritty realities. You see, Hollywood loves its sweeping shots of ancient cities, slick with the sheen of mystery and romance. But let's get real. The Nabataeans didn't build Petra to be the backdrop for Indiana Jones escapades. They had more pressing concerns, like keeping the economy ticking and making sure their political influence didn't evaporate like a puddle in the desert sun. First up, let's talk about those flashy facades. While they might seem tailor-made for a cinematic close-up, these ornate structures were more about function than flair. Take the Treasury, or Al-Khazne, as it's locally known. Sure, it looks like it was plucked straight from an ancient architectural daydream, all 39 meters high and intricately carved. But in reality, it wasn't some ancient celebrity's palatial pad. It was likely a royal tomb or perhaps a temple, just a touch more solemn than the glamorous narratives suggest. And here's a kicker. The treasury's name actually stems from the local legend that it was a hiding place for treasure. But sorry to burst that bubble. It was more about eternal rest than hidden riches. The name is a Hollywood-style embellishment, much like the idea that Petra was a hidden city. The locals knew it well. It was the rest of the world that was late to the party. Moving on, Petra was a crucial cog in the economic machine of the Nabataean kingdom. Its strategic position along trade routes made it a bustling bazaar of goods and ideas. The Nabataeans weren't just stone carvers. They were shrewd business people who knew how to capitalize on their prime location. They didn't build Petra to impress tourists. They built it to control commerce. Caravans laden with spices, textiles, and luxury goods passed through, and the Nabataeans, ever the savvy entrepreneurs, collected taxes and tolls like a well-oiled ancient toll booth. This cash flow was the lifeblood of their economy, funding not just their architectural projects, but also their political endeavors. And speaking of politics, Petra wasn't just a monument to commerce. It was a symbol of power. The Nabataeans were masters of diplomacy, playing the regional game of thrones with aplomb. Their ability to navigate alliances with empires like Rome was a testament to their political savvy. Sure, they didn't have diplomatic immunity or embassies, but they knew how to keep the peace and ensure their autonomy, which is no small feat when you're sandwiched between territorial giants. Now, let's address the popular misconception of the Nabataeans as mere desert nomads. By the height of their civilization, they were anything but. Petra was a melting pot where the East met the West, a hub where different cultures, languages, and religions coexisted. This cultural synthesis wasn't just a happy accident. It was a deliberate strategy to foster trade and strengthen political ties. The Nabataeans understood the power of cultural capital long before it became a buzzword in modern economics. As we dig deeper into Petra, it's clear that the Nabataeans didn't just leave us with a pretty postcard. They left a legacy of strategic brilliance and architectural innovation. Their structures weren't just about aesthetics. They were statements of resilience and ingenuity. The amphitheater, for instance, with its 4,000 seats carved directly into the rock, wasn't just for entertainment. It was a venue for political and social gatherings, a place where community and culture came together in a display of civic pride. And while Petra may capture the imagination with its grandeur, its real magic lies in its practicality. The water management system wasn't just about survival. It was about sustainability. The Nabataeans transformed scarcity into abundance, a lesson in resourcefulness that resonates even today. Their ability to engineer an oasis in the desert is a testament to human ingenuity and the power of adaptation. So, next time you see Petra glamorized on the silver screen, remember, this wasn't just an ancient set piece. It was a living, breathing city, a nexus of trade and culture, a testament to the Nabataeans' ability to turn adversity into advantage. The rose-red city, half as old as time, is more than just a relic of the past. It's a reminder that human innovation knows no bounds, even in the harshest of landscapes. As we continue to unravel the layers of the Nabataeans' world, remember that every stone in Petra holds a story, each echoing the ingenuity and resilience of its creators. This isn't just an archaeological wonder. It's a narrative of human potential, etched into the rock for all eternity. Stay tuned as we delve further into the architectural marvels and the societal dynamics that made the Nabataeans the true architects of the desert. We've got more myths to bust and more history to uncover, so keep your explorer hats on. This journey is just getting started. And as we peel back yet another layer of Petra's grand facade, we find ourselves peeking into the everyday lives of the Nabataeans, because it wasn't all about carving rock and raking in caravan taxis. Behind the sandstone curtain was a society buzzing with activity and social dynamics that would make a soap opera look tame. So, what did life look like in this desert kingdom, where the elite lived like royalty without the pesky paparazzi, and the workers toiled away under the relentless sun? Well, grab your metaphorical sun hat, because we're diving into the nitty-gritty of Nabataean society. First off, let's talk about the Nabataean elite, those desert bigwigs who were living their best lives in the heart of Petra. If you think the Kardashians have a monopoly on opulent lifestyles, think again. The Nabataean aristocracy was rolling in wealth, thanks to a steady stream of income from trade. These weren't people who just sat around counting their gold coins. They were active participants in the cultural and political life of the city, hosting lavish banquets in their rock-carved homes that would make Jay Gatsby green with envy. Their homes, adorned with frescoes and mosaics, were not just status symbols, but also a testament to the blend of cultural influences that flowed through Petra. Think Greek chic meets Arabian opulence. But it wasn't all fun and games for the elite. They had responsibilities too, like maintaining their status through strategic marriages and alliances. It was a game of power and influence, where family ties were as crucial as trade routes. The ruling class needed to keep their fingers on the pulse of both local and regional politics to ensure that their little slice of the desert remained a thriving hub. They were the original networkers, long before LinkedIn made it mainstream. Now, let's shift gears and talk about the unsung heroes of Nabataean society, the workers, artisans, and laborers who turned architectural dreams into reality. These were the folks who wielded chisels and hammers, transforming the rugged landscape into a city that still leaves us awestruck today. And while we're all for romanticizing the artistry involved, let's get real. This was no easy gig. Imagine spending your days perched on scaffolding, carving intricate details into rock faces, all while the desert sun did its best to turn you into a human raisin. It was grueling, physically demanding work, and it took generations to complete the masterpieces of Petra. To say these workers were undervalued would be an understatement. Their contributions were vital, yet their lives were far from glamorous. They lived in modest dwellings, likely constructed from mud brick, a stark contrast to the grand facades they helped create. Their day-to-day existence was focused on survival, managing scarce resources, and balancing the whims of nature with the demands of their Nabataean overlords. If anything, their story is a reminder of the timeless truth that great achievements often rest on the shoulders of the many, not just the few. Economically, the Nabataean society was a well-oiled machine. At its peak, Petra was home to as many as 20,000 people, a bustling metropolis by ancient standards. The economy was driven by trade, but it was agriculture that kept the local populace fed. Thanks to their mastery of water management, the Nabataeans were able to coax crops from the desert soil. They grew wheat, barley, and olives, and even managed a few vineyards. Because what's an ancient city without a little wine to wash down the camel stake? Socially, the Nabataeans were as diverse as a New York City subway car. Petra was a cultural melting pot, where Aramaic, Arabic, Greek, and Latin were spoken in the markets, and religious practices ranged from traditional Arabian polytheism to the worship of Greek and Roman gods. This eclectic mix wasn't just a quirk of geography. It was a conscious strategy to attract traders and ensure the city's prosperity. The The Nabataeans understood the value of cultural diversity long before it became a corporate buzzword. And let's not forget the women of Nabataean society, who played a surprisingly influential role for their time. Unlike many of their contemporaries, Nabataean women could own property and were depicted in inscriptions and art as individuals with agency and influence. They might not have been leading armies or holding political office, but they wielded power in subtle ways, through family connections and economic activities. It's a refreshing reminder that history isn't just a boys' club, even if the history books sometimes like to pretend otherwise. As we sift through the sands of time, it becomes clear that the Nabataeans were more than just master builders and shrewd traders. They were a society that thrived on innovation, adaptability, and a keen understanding of their environment. They didn't just survive in the desert. They flourished, creating a legacy that continues to captivate us today. Their story is a testament to human resilience and ingenuity, a reminder that even in the harshest conditions, there's room for greatness. So, as we wrap up this exploration of Nabataean social dynamics, remember that Petra is more than just a city carved from rock. It's a monument to the people who lived, worked, and dreamed within its walls. From the elite, who navigated the intricate web of politics, and trade to the workers who etched their mark into history with every chisel stroke, the Nabataeans were a diverse and dynamic people whose legacy is as enduring as the sandstone they shaped. And don't worry, we're not done yet. We've only scratched the surface of the Nabataean world, and there's plenty more to uncover. So, hold on to your sun hats and keep your curiosity piqued, because our journey through the architectural marvels and social intricacies of the Nabataeans is far from over. Stay tuned for the next chapter in this saga of sand, stone, and ingenuity. There's more history to unravel, more myths to bust, and more stories to tell. As our journey through the Nabataean world reaches its final chapter, it's time to shift gears and delve into the decline of this once mighty civilization. Because let's face it, even the most impressive empires can't escape the irresistible pull of history's tide. The Nabataeans, who had turned a barren desert into a thriving hub of commerce and culture, eventually faced pressures that even their savvy couldn't withstand. So, what went wrong for our desert dynamos? Let's start with the external forces that began to chip away at Nabataean dominance. Picture this. It's the 2nd century CE, and the Roman Empire is flexing its muscles across the Mediterranean like a bodybuilder at the gym. The Nabataeans, ever the shrewd diplomats, had managed to keep the Romans at bay through alliances and trade deals. But as the saying goes, keep your friends close and your empires closer. The Romans, masters of expansion and taxation, finally decided they'd rather control the lucrative trade routes directly than play nice with their desert neighbors. In 106 C, Emperor Trajan formally annexed the Nabataean kingdom, transforming it into the Roman province of Arabia Petrea. It was a hostile takeover of sorts, but without the boardroom drama. Now, you might wonder, why didn't the Nabataeans put up a fight? Well, it seems they took the pragmatic route. They understood the futility of resisting Rome's might. After all, Roman legions weren't something you casually swipe left on. Instead, they opted for a peaceful transition, a move that preserved some of their local autonomy and kept the bloodshed to a minimum. It was a strategic retreat, not unlike bowing out of a heated Twitter debate before it turns into a digital brawl. Internally, the Nabataeans were grappling with their own set of challenges. As with any society that thrives on trade, economic shifts can be as treacherous as quicksand. The rise of maritime trade routes, which bypassed the desert caravans, began to divert commerce away from Petra. The city that once bustled with the clamor of traders and the jingle of coin purses found itself sidelined by the allure of sea travel. You could say the Nabataeans were the blockbuster of the ancient world, caught off guard by the Netflix of maritime trade. But it wasn't just economics that played a part in their decline. The Nabataeans, who had once been the masters of water management, found their infrastructure aging and increasingly unable to support their growing population. Droughts and natural wear took their toll, and the once impeccable system of cisterns and aqueducts began to falter. When your survival hinges on every drop of water, that's the kind of issue you can't just patch with a quick fix. Culturally, the Nabataeans were also experiencing a transition. As they became more integrated into the Roman world, their distinctive identity started to blur. Latin inscriptions began appearing alongside the traditional Nabataean script, and the influence of Roman art and architecture seeped into their once unique style. It was a slow fade into the background, like your favorite indie band signing with a major label and losing their edge. Despite the decline, the legacy of the Nabataeans remains etched in stone. Petra, with its breathtaking facades and ingenious engineering, stands as a testament to their brilliance. It's a city that refuses to be forgotten, whispering stories of a time when the desert was alive with the pulse of commerce and culture. In a world where civilizations rise and fall like waves on the shore, the Nabataeans managed to carve their place in history, quite literally, into the landscape. So how do we remember a civilization that's been swallowed by the sands of time? Perhaps it's through the lens of resilience and adaptability, qualities that defined the Nabataeans at their peak. They were, after all, the original masters of turning adversity into opportunity, of finding abundance in scarcity. Their story reminds us that innovation often springs from necessity, and that even in the harshest environments, human creativity can flourish. As we wrap up our exploration, let's take a moment to appreciate the Nabataeans not just as ancient architects and traders, but as storytellers, etching their narrative into the cliffs of Petra for future generations to discover. Their legacy isn't just in the stones they carved, but in the lessons they left behind, lessons about resourcefulness, about the power of strategic partnerships, and about the delicate dance between cultural identity and change. In the end, the Nabataeans teach us that while civilizations may rise and fall, the mark they leave on history endures. It's a reminder that the true measure of a civilization isn't just in its monuments, but in the stories it tells and the innovations it inspires. So the next time you find yourself marveling at the grandeur of Petra, remember the people behind the stones, the desert pioneers who showed us that greatness can indeed rise from the most unlikely places. And with that, dear listeners, we conclude our journey through the architectural marvels and the saga of the Nabataeans. Thank you for tuning in, and remember, history isn't just a series of dates and events. It's a tapestry of human experience, woven with stories of ambition, ingenuity, and the enduring quest for greatness. Until next time, keep exploring the past, because the sands of time are filled with stories waiting to be uncovered. If you've ever thought, let's make some history, chances are you've never had the Byzantine Empire in mind. But trust me, they were the OG influencers of the medieval world. Born from the ashes of the Roman Empire around 330 AD, the Byzantines didn't just sit around polishing their icons and praying in Greek. No, this was the Eastern Roman Empire, and it was as much about power moves as it was about piety and pageantry. Let's start with the basics. At its height around 555 AD, under Emperor Justinian I, the Byzantine Empire stretched over 1.5 million square kilometers. That's a space bigger than modern-day Turkey, Syria, and Greece combined. Their capital, Constantinople, now Istanbul, not Constantinople, cue the song by They Might Be Giants, was the glittering jewel in Europe's crown, a bustling metropolis where East met West in a swirl of silks, spices, and the occasional shouting match at the hippodrome. So, what made the Byzantines tick? For a start, they were rolling in dough, and not just because they invented some of the world's first pastries. They had a knack for wealth accumulation that would make a Silicon Valley tighten nod in approval. Their economy was a well-oiled machine, powered by trade routes that stretched from the Mediterranean to the Silk Road. Forget Bitcoin. The Byzantines dealt in solid gold coins called solidi, which were so stable that they were the international currency of choice for over 7 centuries. But beyond the bling and the trade, the Byzantines were cultural powerhouses. Greek was the language of choice, and while Latin was reserved for official decrees and particularly snooty scholars, it was Greek philosophy, literature, and art that really got people talking. Their libraries were stuffed with scrolls, some of which contained the wisdom of ancient philosophers like Aristotle and Plato. And let's not forget those mosaics, sure, they're pretty to look at, but they were also a form of imperial propaganda, each tiny tile a testament to the glory and sanctity of the emperor, who was believed to be God's representative on earth. Politically, the Byzantines played a game of chess, while their neighbors were still figuring out checkers. They were surrounded by foes on all sides: Goths, Persians, Arabs, and later on, the formidable Ottomans. Yet they thrived by mastering the art of diplomacy and espionage. They didn't just build walls, they built relationships, often marrying off princesses to secure alliances or promising trade privileges in exchange for peace. When brute force was necessary, they weren't shy about using it, but they preferred to outwit their opponents with clever treaties and well-timed bribes. It's like the saying goes, why wage war when you can wage a well-funded smear campaign? And then there was the religion factor. The Byzantines were devoutly Christian, but not in a one-size-fits-all way. Their brand of Christianity was orthodox, which basically meant they had their own take on things like the nature of Christ and the role of religious icons. This led to some significant theological spats with their Western counterparts, culminating in the Great Schism of 1054, the messy breakup of the Christian Church into Eastern Orthodox and Roman Catholic branches. It was less we need to talk, and more we need to excommunicate each other. Now, let's segue to Russia, or rather, the precursor to what would become Russia, the Kievan Rus. By the late 9th century, these Slavic and Norse peoples were looking to step up their game. Enter the Byzantines, with their alluring blend of faith, fashion, and fiscal know-how. The Kievan Rus were like the scrappy underdogs who saw the Byzantines not just as neighbors, but as role models. And boy, did they want in on that Byzantine lifestyle. The Byzantines, ever the savvy diplomats, saw an opportunity. Here was a chance to expand their influence northwards. They started by wooing the Kievan princes with gifts, titles, and perhaps a few Byzantine princesses for good measure. The Rus were particularly taken with Byzantine Christianity, which came with the added bonus of literacy and access to Byzantine art and architecture. It's the medieval equivalent of signing up for a cultural and spiritual makeover. So, as the Byzantines dazzled with their golden mosaics and theological debates, they set the stage for a cultural exchange that would shape the history of Eastern Europe for centuries. Stay tuned, because in the next installment, we'll dig deeper into how this Byzantine charm offensive played out in the north, leading to a cultural transformation that's still felt today. And so, the stage was set for a cultural exchange with more drama than a medieval Game of Thrones episode. But before we dive into the juicy details of treaties, marriages, and the occasional axe fight, let's talk geography and those all-important trade routes. The Dnieper River wasn't just a body of water. It was the medieval equivalent of the Silk Road for the Kievan Rus and Byzantines. This watery superhighway stretched over 200 kilometers, linking the frigid north to the opulent south, carrying everything from furs and wax to honey and slaves. Yes, slaves, because medieval commerce wasn't exactly known for its ethical sharping practices. The Varangians, those infamous Norsemen, were the muscle and the merchants behind this operation. Forget the horned helmets, though. That's a Viking myth more stubborn than a mule in a minefield. Instead, picture them in chainmail and practical helmets, steering their longships with the kind of skill that would make a Formula One driver envious. These guys were the original multinational traders, and they spoke the language of commerce fluently, swapping goods and coins from Novgorod all the way to Constantinople. Speaking of Constantinople, the city was like Las Vegas for the Varangians, minus the neon lights and slot machines. They came not only to trade, but also to serve as mercenaries in the Byzantine army, earning a reputation for being as reliable as they were ruthless. When they weren't swinging swords for the emperor, they were sealing business deals, setting the stage for a relationship that was as lucrative as it was complex. You could say the Varangians were the ultimate side hustlers, warriors by day and traders by night. Now, onto the Kievan Rus, were eager to level up from regional power to international players. The Byzantine Empire was their golden ticket, and they were ready to cash it in. It wasn't just about the trade, though. There was a whole lot of political maneuvering going on. One of the most significant power plays was the Treaty of 911 between the Rus and the Byzantines. This treaty was like a medieval linked-in endorsement, recognizing the Rus as legit partners in peace and commerce. It was a big deal, and it paved the way for future agreements that would continue to cement their relationship. And let's not forget the marriages, those strategic unions that were less about romance and more about alliances. Take the case of Princess Anna, sister to Byzantine Emperor Basil Roman II. She was married off to Grand Prince Vladimir of Kiev in 988. This wasn't just a match made in heaven. It was a match made in geopolitical strategy. By marrying Anna, Vladimir not only solidified his alliance with the Byzantines, but also secured a cultural makeover for his people. The icing on the cake, Vladimir's conversion to Christianity, which opened the door for Byzantine priests, architects, and scholars to flood into Kievan Rus, bringing with them the art, architecture, and religious practices that would shape Russian culture for centuries. But let's press pause on the romance of it all and take a look at the practical realities. The Rus were pragmatic players in this medieval chess game. They wanted to boost their economy, secure their borders, and gain prestige on the international stage. The Byzantines, meanwhile, saw the Rus as a buffer against other threats and a potential ally in their own power struggles. In this medieval mashup, there were plenty of myths circulating about the Rus and Byzantines, each more romantic than the last. But if you peel back the layers, what you find are hard-nosed negotiations, strategic marriages, and trade deals that were as gritty as they were glamorous. It was less about fairy-tale diplomacy and more about securing the best deal in a world where alliances shifted like the tides. So, as we wrap up this chapter of Byzantine-Rus relations, remember this. History is rarely as neat and tidy as we'd like it to be. It's a messy, chaotic, and utterly fascinating dance of power, politics, and people. And as we prepare to dive deeper into the Byzantine influence on Russia, let's keep our eyes peeled for the twists and turns that shaped a region and left a legacy still felt today. Stay tuned, because the next part will delve into the cultural transformations and religious upheavals that followed these early exchanges. So, as we gear up for the Christianization of Kievan Rus, let's zoom in on the man of the hour, Prince Vladimir. Imagine a medieval Tinder, and instead of swiping right for romance, Vladimir swiped right for political power. His baptism in 988 wasn't just a religious epiphany. It was a masterstroke of medieval statecraft. This guy knew a strong alliance when he saw one, and the Byzantine Empire was the ultimate catch. Before we canonize Vladimir as St. Vladimir, let's remember he started with a bit of a reputation. A pagan prince with a harem that would make Hugh Hefner blush. Vladimir wasn't exactly living a life of monastic purity. But like any savvy politician, he understood the winds of change. The Christianization of his realm promised not just spiritual salvation, but the kind of political clout that could elevate Kievan Rus from the minor leagues to a major player on the international stage. This was no spur-of-the-moment decision. Vladimir had been shopping around for a religion that would solidify his reign and unify his people. Islam was on the table until Vladimir heard about the whole no-alcohol clause. The Rus were fond of their tipple, and Vladimir famously quipped, "Drinking is the joy of the Rus. We cannot exist without that pleasure." So, Islam was a no-go. Judaism was considered but ultimately dismissed, possibly due to the lack of a strong geopolitical ally. Western Christianity was another option, but the schism between the East and West was brewing, and Vladimir wasn't about to pick a side that might isolate him. Enter Byzantine Christianity, an irresistible package deal. It came with the allure of Byzantine prestige, a connection to the dazzling city of Constantinople, and a royal marriage to boot. Marrying Princess Anna, the sister of the Byzantine emperor, wasn't just about love. Though, who are we kidding, love was probably last on the list. It was a strategic alliance, the kind that could ensure the stability and legitimacy of Vladimir's reign. The baptism of Vladimir was no private affair. It was a public spectacle, a medieval PR event that rivaled a royal wedding. By converting to Christianity, Vladimir wasn't just changing his personal beliefs. He was signaling a new era for his people. The mass baptism of the Kievans in the Dnieper River was a sight to behold. Picture thousands of Rus, possibly grumbling about the cold water, being ushered into the fold of Orthodox Christianity, their pagan idols cast aside. This wasn't just a spiritual overhaul. The influence of Byzantine religion came with a cultural makeover that would shape the identity of Kievan Rus for centuries. Byzantine priests didn't just bring the Bible. They brought literacy, art, and architecture. The Cyrillic script, developed by Saints Cyril and Methodius, became the backbone of Slavic literacy. It was like handing the Rus an all-access pass to the world of knowledge and administration. Literacy meant power, and power meant prestige. And the art and architecture. The Byzantines had a flair for the dramatic, and their artistic influence was nothing short of transformative. The Rus adopted the Byzantine style, blending it with local traditions to create something uniquely their own. Churches sprang up, adorned with frescoes and icons, each one a testament to the fusion of cultures. The Hagia Sophia in Constantinople was the gold standard, and while the Rus couldn't replicate it brick for brick, they certainly captured its spirit. The Cathedral of St. Sophia in Novgorod and the Assumption Cathedral in Vladimir are prime examples, standing as architectural love letters to Byzantine influence. But before we get too misty-eyed about this cultural renaissance, let's talk economics. The Christianization of Kievan Rus wasn't just about spiritual enlightenment. It was a ticket to the Byzantine trade network, a medieval VIP pass to the economic elite club. The Rus could now tap into trade routes that brought silk, spices, and precious metals. Their markets flourished, and their coffers swelled. For Vladimir, converting to Christianity wasn't just a leap of faith, it was a leap into economic prosperity. Now, let's not ignore the practical perks of this conversion. By aligning with the Byzantines, Vladimir secured his borders against enemies who might have thought twice about messing with a Christian ruler backed by the mighty Byzantine Empire. It was a geopolitical insurance policy, a deterrence against potential aggressors who might otherwise see Kievan Rus as easy pickings. And while we're myth-busting, let's debunk the notion that the Kievan Rus adopted Christianity solely out of piety. Sure, the spiritual benefits were a nice bonus, but Vladimir's decision was steeped in political savvy. This wasn't a divine calling. It was a calculated move on the political chessboard. Religion was a tool, a means to an end that promised unity, stability, and leverage in a world where alliances were as fickle as the medieval weather. So, as we wrap up this chapter of Vladimir's grand strategy, remember that history is rarely as simple as it seems. It's a tapestry of ambition, power, and practicality, woven together with threads of faith and fidelity. The Christianization of Kievan Rus was a turning point, a moment when the stars aligned and a pagan prince became a Christian king. But the story doesn't end here. The Byzantine influence on Russian religion, art, and architecture was just beginning to unfold, setting the stage for a cultural evolution that would continue to shape the region for centuries to come. Stay tuned as we delve deeper into the Byzantine legacy in Russia, exploring the lasting impact of this grand historical alliance. So, as the Byzantine influence unfurled over Kievan Rus like a luxurious silk tapestry, let's dive into the juicy details of this cultural and intellectual exchange. If you thought this was a simple story of peaceful adoption, think again. The reality was more Renaissance fare than fairy tale, complete with power plays, cultural clashes, and yes, the bureaucratic shenanigans that made Byzantine red tape the stuff of medieval legend. First up, the legal system. The Byzantines brought their laws to Kievan Rus like they were handing over a medieval manual on how to run a state without losing your head. The Russkaya Pravda, the primary legal code of Kievan Rus, was heavily inspired by Byzantine law. It was like getting the Byzantine Empire's greatest hits album, minus the catchy tunes, but with all the Byzantine complexities. The Pravda included everything from property rights to criminal law, with penalties that ranged from fines to, well, more fines. The Byzantines had a thing for monetary penalties. They were like the original pay-your-way-out-of-trouble enthusiasts. Now, let's talk about education. The Byzantines were the Ivy League of the medieval world, with a penchant for Greek philosophy, literature, and science. They weren't just about teaching the ABCs. They were about crafting a curriculum that included Aristotle, Pythagoras, and Homer. Kievan elite, eager to shed their pagan past and don the intellectual robes of their Byzantine mentors, embraced this educational influx. Schools sprang up, and literacy rates began to rise, albeit slowly, like medieval molasses. The Cyrillic script, developed by Saints Cyril and Methodius, was the gift that kept on giving, a key to unlocking the treasures of written knowledge. It was as if the Byzantines had handed the Kievan Rus the keys to a literary Lamborghini. But hold your horses, because this wasn't all smooth sailing. The cultural exchange was less a harmonious symphony and more a cacophony of clashing symbols and shifting power dynamics. While the Byzantine influence was undeniable, it wasn't always welcomed with open arms. The Kievan Rus were fiercely proud of their Norse and Slavic roots, and the infusion of Byzantine culture was sometimes seen as an encroachment rather than a gift. This was less about making friends and more about navigating a delicate dance of influence and identity. And then there was the Byzantine bureaucracy. If you think modern paperwork is a nightmare, Imagine navigating a system where every decision required a mini-novel of documentation. The Byzantines had a love affair with bureaucracy that would make a DMV clerk blush. Their penchant for records, decrees, and diplomatic correspondence was legendary. It was like they invented bureaucracy just so they could create more of it. The Kievan Rus, in contrast, were more about straightforward governance, and the Byzantine penchant for red tape was both a marvel and a migraine. Despite these challenges, the Byzantine cultural infusion left an indelible mark on Kievan Rus. Their art and architecture, infused with Byzantine influence, became a hallmark of the region. Imagine the domes of St. Sophia Cathedral in Novgorod, rising like golden crowns against the sky, each one a testament to the architectural prowess borrowed from Constantinople. The religious icons painted with meticulous care were more than just art. They were windows to the divine, a tangible connection to the spiritual world that the Byzantines had introduced. However, let's not sugarcoat the narrative. The cultural exchange wasn't all high art and intellectual enlightenment. It was also about power, who wielded it and who was shaped by it. The Byzantines were savvy operators, using their cultural exports as tools of influence. The Kievan Rus, while eager students, were also astute players in the Game of Thrones, adopting Byzantine ways when it suited their needs and rejecting them when it didn't. And we can't ignore the occasional conflicts that bubbled beneath the surface. The Byzantines, for all their cultural clout, weren't always the benevolent mentors they appeared to be. Their interactions with the Kievan Rus were sometimes marked by tension and rivalry, particularly when it came to trade and territorial disputes. The Dnieper River, that vital artery of commerce, was as much a battlefield of economic interests as it was a conduit of cultural exchange. So, as we continue to unravel this Byzantine Rus tapestry, let's keep our eyes on the threads of power and influence that wove their way through history. This was a complex relationship, one that shaped the course of Eastern European history in ways both profound and pragmatic. And as we gear up for the next installment, remember this. History is a story of human ambition, a tale as messy as it is magnificent, filled with the hopes and follies of those who dared to dream beyond their borders. The Byzantine legacy in Russia was just getting started, and the next part of our saga promises more twists, turns, and tantalizing tales of cultural and political intrigue. So, stay tuned, because we're about to dive deeper into the Byzantine influence and its lasting impact on Russian culture, society, and statecraft. As we delve into the waning days of the Byzantine Empire, it's like watching a heavyweight champion in the final rounds of a bruising match. Once the mightiest force in Christendom, the Byzantines found themselves besieged by forces not just of men, but of history itself. By the 15th century, the empire had shriveled down to a shadow of its former self, largely confined to the city of Constantinople and a few surrounding territories. Picture this. From an empire that once stretched over 5 million square kilometers, the Byzantines were reduced to managing what was essentially a glorified city-state. The fall of Constantinople in 1453 was less a sudden collapse and more a slow unraveling, like a sweater snagged on a rusty nail. The Ottomans, led by Sultan Mehmed Roman II, laid siege to the city with a force of around 100,000 men, backed by a cutting-edge piece of artillery. The 27-foot-long cannon capable of hurling stone balls weighing up to 600 kilograms. The Byzantine defenders, a mere 7,000 strong, were outnumbered and outgunned, clinging to their walls with a determination that was nothing short of heroic. But bravery alone couldn't withstand the relentless pounding of Ottoman cannons. On May 29, 1453, the city fell, marking the end of an era and the start of a new one under Ottoman rule. This was the moment that sent shockwaves across the Christian world. Yet, over in Russia, a different story was unfolding. Moscow, once a minor player on the medieval stage, began to see itself as the rightful heir to the Byzantine legacy. If Constantinople was the second Rome, then Moscow was positioning itself as the third Rome, with all the religious and political gravitas that entailed. But before we start anointing Moscow as the savior of orthodoxy, let's peel back the layers of this narrative. The rise of Moscow as the Third Rome wasn't a divine mandate handed down with holy fanfare. It was a calculated move, a blend of religious fervor and shrewd political maneuvering. The idea was championed by Russian clerics and princes who saw an opportunity to elevate Moscow's status both spiritually and politically. They claimed that with Constantinople's fall, Moscow was now the last bastion of true orthodoxy. It was a narrative that had the appeal of a medieval blockbuster, a city destined to continue the sacred mission of Christianity in the East. But let's be real, this was as much about power as it was about piety. The Grand Princes of Moscow, notably Ivan Roman III and his grandson Ivan Roman IV, better known as Ivan the Terrible, used the mantle of the Third Rome to legitimize their authority and centralize power. Ivan Roman III married Sophia Paleolog, the niece of the last Byzantine emperor, Constantine Roman XI, in 1472. This union wasn't just a romantic story of East meeting West. It was a strategic alliance that bolstered Ivan's claim to imperial continuity. With this marriage came not just a bride, but Byzantine scholars, architects, and artists, all adding to Moscow's burgeoning prestige. Economically, the fall of Constantinople and the rise of Moscow were intertwined with the ever-important trade routes. The Silk Road was shifting, and Moscow, straddling the Volga River and its tributaries, became a vital link between East and West. The city flourished, its coffers swelling with wealth from trade in fur, timber, and grain. As Moscow grew richer, it also grew more influential, setting the stage for its expansion into what would become the Russian Empire. But while Moscow's story as the Third Rome is often told with a sense of inevitability, let's not ignore the messy realities beneath the myth. The transition from Byzantine to Russian Orthodox leadership was not seamless. There were theological debates and political jockeying, with various factions vying for influence. The Russian Church, while adopting the Byzantine liturgy and customs, also asserted its independence, a move both spiritual and strategic. And let's not forget the internal strife within Russia itself, where the consolidation of power often came at the expense of local princes and their autonomy. Yet, the Byzantine legacy in Russia was profound and enduring. The religious, artistic, and cultural influences that flowed from Constantinople to Moscow left a mark that shaped Russian identity for centuries. The onion domes that dot the Russian skyline, the richly adorned icons, and the solemn chants of Orthodox liturgy all owe a debt to Byzantine artistry and spirituality. It's a legacy that's both grand and grounded, a testament to the power of cultural exchange, even amid political turmoil. But what about the myths we've spun around this historical saga? The narrative of Moscow as the Third Rome is as romantic as it is revisionist. It paints a picture of divine continuity, when the reality was a complex dance of ambition and adaptation. The Russians didn't just inherit the Byzantine legacy, they remolded it to fit their own needs and aspirations. It was less about preserving a dying tradition, and more about forging a new path that drew from the past, while looking to the future. In this grand tale of empires rising and falling, of cities claiming divine destinies, we're reminded of one crucial truth. History is as much about the stories we tell as it is about the facts we can prove. The Byzantine influence on Russia is a story of transformation, one where the lines between myth and reality blur into a tapestry of human ambition and innovation. It's a narrative that continues to resonate, echoing through the halls of the Kremlin and the spires of Russian churches, a legacy of a time when the East met the North and changed the course of history forever. As we conclude this exploration of Byzantine influence on Russia, let's take a moment to reflect on the enduring ties that bind. The cultural and religious threads spun from this historical relationship continue to weave through modern Russia, a reminder of a past both glorious and gritty. The legacy of the Byzantine Empire may have ended in 1453, but its spirit lives on in the art, architecture, and Orthodox faith that define Russian identity. And as we look to the future, it's a legacy that challenges us to consider the complex interplay of power, culture, and belief that shapes our world even today. So here's to the Byzantines, the original influencers, whose echoes still resonate across the ages. If you ever thought your family reunions were complicated, take a moment to consider the household of Tutankhamun, the boy king of Egypt. Born around 1341 BCE, Little Tut had a front row seat to one of history's most riveting soap operas, the great royal family drama of ancient Egypt. At the time, Egypt wasn't just a kingdom. It was a veritable cosmic power, with its claws dug deep into the sands of the ancient world. But just like any good drama, there was intrigue, betrayal, and a whole lot of awkward family dinners. Let's start with the head honcho of this dynastic circus, Akhenaten, Tutankhamun's dad. A pharaoh with a penchant for shaking things up, Akhenaten decided that the traditional Egyptian pantheon, those countless gods with the bodies of humans and heads of animals, was just too much divine bureaucracy. So, he ditched them all in favor of Aten, the sun disk, in what historians refer to as the Amona Revolution. This was monotheism before it was cool. Now you might think, hey, cutting down on all those gods seems efficient. But the priests of Ammon, who had their nice little gig going, were not amused. In fact, Akhenaten's religious pivot ticked them off so much that they probably wished they could have a Guards' Council meeting to vent about it. This religious shake-up was more than just a theological debate. It was a full-on socio-political upheaval. Imagine the priests of Ammon, who were used to their cushy, God-sponsored life, suddenly finding themselves out of a job. Not only did Akhenaten append the belief system, but he also moved the capital from Thebes to a newly built city, Akhetaten, now known as Amarna. Talk about burning bridges, or in this case, temples. The move was a costly affair, and the construction of Akhetaten was no weekend DIY project. It needed resources, manpower, and time, all of which could have been spent on, actually running the kingdom. While Akhenaten was busy playing favorites with Aten, Egypt's rivals were eyeing the situation with glee. Remember, the ancient world was a bit like a land of competitive neighbors, and a distracted Egypt was an opportunity to gain ground. But Akhenaten seemed unfazed, continuing his religious focus, which, let's be honest, was like leaving the back door open in a neighborhood full of thieves. Amidst all this, little Tutankhamun was born into a world where guards could be sidelined with the wave of a pharaoh's hand, and the political landscape was shakier than a desert mirage. His birth name was Tutankhaten, meaning living image of Aten. But we'll get to why that changed faster than a teenage phase. Tut's coming into the world was likely more about dynasty than destiny. He was a necessary pawn in the grand game of power chess that was ancient Egypt. Growing up as a child king sounds glamorous, but in Tut's case, it was more like a live-action game of thrones with real consequences. When you're a kid, ruling a kingdom where the adults have a serious addiction to intrigue, it's not all pyramids and papyrus. The reality is that Tut was probably more of a figurehead while the adults pulled the strings. His advisors, most notably I, who was like that one uncle who always seems to know what's best, and Hormheb, the military man with ambitions as grand as the Nile, were the real players behind the scenes. As Tut grew, the political pressure didn't ease up. The young pharaoh had to navigate a court rife with factions, each with its own agenda. Meanwhile, the Amona Revolution was proving less popular than a wet cat, and the priests of Ammon were itching for a comeback tour. And come back they did, with Tutankhamun eventually restoring the old guards and moving the capital back to Thebes, a decision likely influenced by those who saw the Aten experiment as a colossal flop. The name change from Tutankhaten to Tutankhamun was more than just a rebranding. It was a return to the status quo, a move to appease the gods, and, more importantly, the people who worshipped them. This was the ancient equivalent of restoring faith in the system, ensuring that the priests were back in their temples, the guards in their places, and the people not in revolt. So there you have it, a young boy thrust into a world of divine politics and power plays, trying to find his way amidst the chaos. Tutankhamun's origins are a testament to the fact that even in ancient times, family dynamics were never simple, and political landscapes were just as treacherous as they are today. Stay tuned for more as we delve further into the life and times of this young pharaoh, a tale filled with as many twists and turns as the Nile itself. As the sun rose over the sands of ancient Egypt, casting its golden glow on the Nile, young Tutankhamun, all of 9 years old, was about to take center stage in history's grand theater. But let's set the scene here. This wasn't just any boy becoming king. This was a child stepping into a role that would make most seasoned adults break out in a cold sweat. Imagine trying to rule a kingdom when you're barely old enough to rule a game of hopscotch. Tutankhamun's ascension to the throne was less a coronation and more a strategic appointment, orchestrated by the real power players, Ai and Horemheb. These two were like the ultimate backstage crew, pulling the strings while ensuring the spotlight stayed on the young pharaoh. Ai, the Grand Vizier, was the seasoned politician, whispering in Tut's ear like a constant reminder app, while Horemheb, the military general, ensured that Egypt's defenses were as robust as a fortress. Think of them as the ancient world's answer to a dynamic duo, though with considerably more at stake than a comic book plotline. Now, if you're wondering why a kid was crowned at such a tender age, the answer lies in the chaos left by his father Akhenaten's religious upheaval. The kingdom needed stability, and what better way to achieve that than by placing a pliant young pharaoh on the throne and surrounding him with advisors who had a vested interest in restoring the old order. Tutankhamun was, in many ways, a symbol, a return to the good old days when the guards were plenty and the temples were open for business. Speaking of business, let's talk economics. Akhenaten's religious reforms had drained the royal coffers, building a new city from scratch, expensive, angering priests who controlled significant wealth. Not exactly a savvy fiscal move. By the time Tutankhamun came into power, Egypt's economy was about as stable as a sandcastle in high tide. Reinstating the old guards wasn't just a religious decision. It was an economic necessity. The temples were like ancient banks, and getting them back in operation meant more than spiritual redemption. It meant financial recovery. In this climate, Tutankhamun's role was to be the face of a movement to undo his father's radical policies. While he was busy with lessons and the ancient equivalent of homeschooling, Ai and Horemheb were hard at work reversing the Ammon revolution. The capital was moved back to Thebes, a decision that was as much about logistics as it was about legacy. The priests of Ammon were reinstated, and with them, the flow of wealth and influence that had been the lifeblood of Egyptian society for centuries. But let's not forget that Tutankhamun was still a kid. While the adults in the room were managing the kingdom's affairs, Tut was navigating the challenges of adolescence with the added pressure of wearing a crown. Picture trying to focus on geometry when your homework involves guards, politics, and social unrest. Not exactly the carefree childhood most of us imagine. Still, Tutankhamun did his part, however small, in stabilizing a kingdom that had been teetering on the edge of chaos. And what of the myths that surround him? The romantic image of Tutankhamun as a mighty, god-like ruler is more fiction than fact. The reality is that he was a child caught in the middle of a power struggle, used by those around him to further their own ends. Yet, the allure of a young boy king remains irresistible, a tale of innocence amidst intrigue, of destiny and duty that continues to captivate our imaginations. As Tutankhamun's reign continued, it's clear that his time on the throne was marked by the efforts of those who guided him. The economic policies, the religious restorations, the political maneuvers, all orchestrated by Ai and Horemheb, who were as much architects of the kingdom's future as Tutankhamun was its figurehead. Their ability to steer Egypt toward stability while using Tutankhamun as the face of their agenda was a testament to their political acumen. Yet, Tutankhamun wasn't entirely a passive participant. His marriage to Ankhesenamun, his half-sister, was both a personal and political union, designed to consolidate power and ensure the continuation of the royal line. Their relationship, though shrouded in the mists of time, adds yet another layer to the complex tapestry of his short, yet impactful reign. In the end, Tutankhamun's rule was brief, just a decade, but it was a decade that left an indelible mark on history. His reign may have been orchestrated by others, but it was his legacy that would endure, not least because of the treasures buried with him in the sands of the Valley of the Kings. But that's a story for another day. For now, we'll leave Tutankhamun in the capable hands of his advisors, guiding him through the political labyrinth of ancient Egypt as we await the next chapter in this captivating saga. And so, with young Tutankhamun under the care of his seasoned advisors, Egypt began its slow shuffle back to its polytheistic roots, like a prodigal son returning home from a brief flirtation with avant-garde monotheism. In restoring the pantheon, Tutankhamun was not just engaging in a spiritual revival, but attempting a grand political balancing act. You see, the priesthood of Ammon wasn't just about chanting hymns and lighting incense. They were a powerful political entity, akin to a modern-day lobbying group with divine connections. By reinstating these deities, the young pharaoh wasn't just appeasing the gods. He was re-establishing the socio-political order that kept the kingdom ticking. Now, let's dive into the juicy details modern science has unraveled about this enigmatic boy king, debunking some myths while we're at it. First up, the romanticized image of Tutankhamun as the epitome of ancient Egyptian beauty. Those iconic depictions of him leading chariots into battle. Artistic license, folks. The reality, as revealed by modern medical examinations, paints a far less glamorous picture. Thanks to a 2005 CT scan, we know that Tutankhamun was more like the poster child for a royal family tree that didn't quite branch out enough. He had a cleft palate and a club foot, and genetic testing suggests he suffered from a host of hereditary disorders, possibly due to the cozy family tradition of marrying relatives. But wait, there's more. The idea that Tutankhamun might have been a robust warrior is about as believable as a pharaoh running a marathon in full regalia. His physical ailments likely made it difficult for him to even walk unaided, let alone lead troops into battle. So, while the traditional art of the time shows him smiting enemies with the vigor of a demigod, the reality was probably a bit more sedentary. Talk about a case of history being written by not just the victors, but the artists with a flair for fiction. Tutankhamun's health woes weren't the only revelations that have been unearthed. The cultural and technological landscape of his reign was also a fascinating tapestry of ambition and regression. Despite the chaos of his father's reign, Egypt still managed to maintain its reputation as a hub of architectural innovation. One of the most significant achievements of Tutankhamun's era was the continuation of grand building projects, a testament to the enduring Egyptian penchant for monumental architecture. Although Tutankhamun's own tomb was modest compared to the grandeur of others, it was during his time that the seeds of later architectural wonders were sown, blending tradition with emerging styles. And let's not forget Egypt's insatiable obsession with gold, a fixation that even King Midas would envy. Gold, in ancient Egypt, wasn't just a symbol of wealth. It was a divine material, believed to be the flesh of the gods themselves. Tutankhamun's tomb, famously discovered by Howard Carter in 1922, was a glittering testament to this obsession. Although relatively small, the tomb was crammed with over 5,000 items, including that iconic golden death mask. This wasn't just bling for bling's sake. It was a statement of divine favor and eternal life. The Egyptians believed that the more gold you had in the afterlife, the better your chances of getting a prime plot in paradise. Economically, this period was a mixed bag. While the restoration of the old gods helped stabilize the tax revenues flowing into the temples, the costs of maintaining Egypt's extensive military and building projects were substantial. They often relied on a barter system, with grain and other goods forming the backbone of the economy. Despite the challenges, Egypt's economy, like the Nile itself, ebbed and flowed, supporting a civilization that was as resilient as it was ancient. So, as we peel back the layers of Tutankhamun's reign, what emerges is a story of contrasts, of a young king caught between tradition and modernity, health and myth, gold and grit. His reign may have been brief, but it was a pivotal chapter in the narrative of ancient Egypt. As we await the next installment in this saga, let's remember that the story of Tutankhamun is not just about a boy king with a penchant for shiny things. It's about a civilization grappling with change and the enduring human quest for legacy. Stay tuned as we continue to unravel the mysteries and marvels of this fascinating epoch. And so, as we wade through the glittering sands of Tutankhamun's short but oh-so-fascinating reign, it's time to peel back yet another tantalizing layer of ancient Egyptian history. A layer that involves a bit of intrigue, a splash of scandal, the ultimate whodunit of the ancient world, the mysterious death of the boy king himself. Death and taxes may be the only certainties in life, but when it comes to Tutankhamun, even his demise is cloaked in uncertainty and the allure of conspiracy. Let's set the stage in 1323 BCE, when Tutankhamun shuffled off this mortal coil at the tender age of 19, leaving behind a kingdom and a mystery that would baffle historians for millennia. Was it an accident, assassination, or just the unfortunate end of a young man with more genetic issues than a soap opera family tree? Theories abound, each more tantalizing than the last, and not unlike the plot twists of a particularly juicy Netflix series. First up on the roster of theories is the notion that Tutankhamun met his end due to a chariot accident. This theory gained traction thanks to the condition of his mummified remains. A 1968 X-ray showed a fractured skull, while a 2005 CT scan revealed a broken leg, which some suggest could have been the result of a nasty fall. But hold your horses, or chariots in this case, because not everyone's on board with this idea. Some scholars argue that these injuries might have occurred post-mortem during the embalming process. That's right, even in death, Tut's body was subjected to the equivalent of a historical slapstick routine. Then there's the theory of foul play, which has all the hallmarks of a classic murder mystery. The ancient Egyptian court was rife with intrigue, and Tutankhamun's untimely death conveniently cleared the path for others with a vested interest in the throne. I, the Grand Vizier, and Hormheb, the military mastermind, are often cast as the leading suspects in this ancient whodunit. The idea is that with Tut out of the picture, I could ascend to the throne, which he did, albeit briefly. But let's not leap to conclusions faster than a gazelle on the Nile's banks. There's little solid evidence to back up these claims, making this theory a tantalizing yet elusive piece of historical gossip. Adding to the drama, genetic testing conducted in the 21st century has revealed that Tutankhamun suffered from multiple health issues, including malaria and a bone disorder called Kohler disease. These findings suggest that his death might have been more about natural causes than nefarious plots. Still, the allure of a conspiracy is hard to shake. After all, there's something undeniably compelling about imagining palace intrigue and whispered plots in the shadowed halls of ancient Thebes. Now, let's talk aftermath. Tutankhamun's death kicked off a frantic race to secure the throne, a scramble more chaotic than rush hour in Cairo. I, our ever-ambitious vizier, seized the opportunity and took the crown, donning the double crown of Upper and Lower Egypt like it was a hat he'd been eyeing in the royal wardrobe for years. His reign, though short-lived, was marked by attempts to solidify his power and maintain the status quo that Tutankhamun's reign had barely re-established. But before I could get too comfortable, there was the small matter of Tutankhamun's burial, a process that was as rushed and haphazard as a teenager's attempt to tidy up before a parent's inspection. The young pharaoh was interred in a tomb that was, by royal standards, modest at best. It seems that Tutankhamun's burial was a hastily organized affair, likely due to the unexpected nature of his death and the subsequent political upheaval. Despite its modesty, Tutankhamun's tomb was packed with treasures that would make even the most seasoned grave robbers break out in a cold sweat. Over 5,000 artifacts were crammed into the small space, including the iconic golden death mask, jewelry, chariots, and even a couple of trumpets, just in case he felt like starting a jazz band in the afterlife. This abundance of loot wasn't just about flaunting wealth. It was about ensuring that Tutankhamun was well-equipped for the life beyond, a testament to the ancient Egyptians' deep-rooted beliefs in the afterlife. The burial itself, however, was far from perfect. The tomb's walls were hastily painted, and some of the artifacts were clearly second-hand, likely repurposed from other burials. The whole scene was a bit like a garage sale of the gods, with Tutankhamun's eternal resting place cobbled together in a manner that was more slapdash than stately. Yet, despite, or perhaps because of, this hurried burial, the tomb remained untouched by grave robbers for over 3,000 years, waiting for Howard Carter's fateful discovery in 1922. Economically and politically, Tutankhamun's death marked the end of an era and the beginning of a new chapter in Egyptian history. The restoration of the old guards had stabilized the kingdom, but the rapid turnover of rulers in its wake left Egypt in a precarious position. I's short reign was followed by that of Hormheb, who, with an iron military grip, sought to erase the memory of the Ammon period altogether, effectively hitting history's reset button. In the grand tapestry of ancient Egypt, Tutankhamun's story is a vibrant thread interwoven with both myth and reality. His life and death encapsulate the eternal dance between power and mortality, and his legacy, though largely shaped by those who followed, continues to capture the imagination of people around the world. As we prepare to dive into the final chapter of his story, remember that Tutankhamun was more than just a boy king. He was a symbol of an era on the brink of transformation, a reminder that even the greatest dynasties are but a fleeting moment in the sands of time. Stay tuned as we continue to unravel the mysteries and marvels of this fascinating epoch. As the dust settled on Tutankhamun's hasty burial and the sands shifted over his modest tomb, his memory was all but swept away by the relentless march of time, or so it seemed. Fast forward to 1922, when Howard Carter, a British archaeologist with a nose for treasure and a patience rivaled only by the Sphinx itself, stumbled upon what would become the most celebrated archaeological find of the 20th century. Tutankhamun's tomb, nestled in the Valley of the Kings, was about to catapult the boy king from obscurity to rock star status faster than you can say mummy's curse. The discovery was nothing short of spectacular. Carter's meticulous excavation uncovered a treasure trove that defied imagination. Over 5,000 artifacts, including the now iconic Golden Death Mask. This wasn't your run-of-the-mill archaeological dig. It was the unearthing of a time capsule, perfectly preserved thanks to the tomb's obscurity. And let's be honest, finding a cache of golden relics is the archaeologist's equivalent of striking oil. The world watched in awe as the treasures were revealed, each piece a testament to the opulence of ancient Egypt, a civilization that knew how to do luxury like nobody's business. Suddenly, Tutankhamun became more than a pharaoh. He was a sensation. The media frenzy that followed was akin to what we'd now see at a royal wedding or a celebrity scandal. Newspapers, magazines, and radio broadcasts couldn't get enough of the young king and his glittering tomb. The timing was perfect. The world, weary from the devastation of World War I, was eager for distraction, and Tutankhamun provided it in spades. His story was spun into a tale of mystery and allure, with whispers of a pharaoh's curse, adding a tantalizing layer of intrigue. You see, a few of those involved with the tomb's excavation met untimely ends, fueling rumors of a supernatural revenge as potent as a scorned deity's wrath. Yet, let's not forget the reality behind the romance. For all its grandeur, Tutankhamun's tomb was relatively modest compared to the sprawling complexes of his predecessors. This wasn't the Ritz of the afterlife. It was more like a well-appointed airbomb. The tomb's size and its hurried construction reflect the unexpected nature of his death and the political chaos that followed. But in a twist of fate, this very modesty may have been Tutankhamun's saving grace, keeping his resting place hidden from grave robbers for over 3 millennia. So why all the fuss over a boy king who ruled for a mere decade? The answer lies in the enduring allure of ancient Egypt itself, a civilization that balanced on the knife edge of myth and reality. The land of the pharaohs, with its monumental pyramids and enigmatic hieroglyphs, has always held a magnetic appeal, a reminder of humanity's quest for immortality and understanding. Tutankhamun, frozen in time, became the poster child for this fascination, a symbol of a lost world brought back to life. His treasures, now displayed in museums around the globe, serve as a window into a society that was both remarkably advanced and deeply spiritual. The golden mask, with its serene expression, is more than just an artifact. It's a connection to the past, a reminder of the sophistication and artistry that characterized ancient Egyptian culture. The intricate designs and craftsmanship of the items found in his tomb speak to a civilization that revered both the gods and the afterlife, pouring immense resources into ensuring a pharaoh's journey beyond was as gilded as his reign on earth. Economically, the discovery of Tutankhamun's tomb was a boon not only for historians, but for Egypt itself, sparking a tourism frenzy that endures to this day. The influx of visitors eager to glimpse the treasures of the young pharaoh has pumped millions into the Egyptian economy, a modern reflection of the ancient kingdom's own reliance on trade and external interest. It's a historical irony that Tutankhamun, who was once a pawn in the political games of his advisors, became a key player in Egypt's contemporary narrative, his legacy reshaping the nation's cultural and economic landscape. Yet, the fascination with Tutankhamun is not just about gold and glory. It's a testament to the human desire to connect with the past. His story, layered with mystery, intrigue, and a dash of scandal, appeals to our collective imagination. The boy king's rise from obscurity is a reminder of history's unpredictable nature, of how the seemingly insignificant can become monumental. It's a narrative that continues to evolve, with each new discovery adding depth to our understanding of ancient Egypt and its enigmatic rulers. In the end, Tutankhamun's legacy is a study in contrasts, a life cut short, yet eternally influential, a king forgotten by history, yet immortalized by modern media. His story is a reminder that history is not just a record of dates and events, but a tapestry woven from the stories of individuals whose lives, whether brief or expansive, contribute to the rich mosaic of human experience. As we close the chapter on Tutankhamun, let's remember that the true magic of his story lies in its ability to captivate and inspire, bridging the gap between the ancient and the modern, the mythical and the real. In the end, Tutankhamun is more than a relic of the past. He's a timeless icon, a symbol of humanity's enduring quest to understand its own story. If you were expecting young Leonardo da Vinci to be the poster child for the starving artist cliché, think again. While he might have been a bit of a wild card, Leonardo's upbringing wasn't exactly the Dickensian tale of woe that some would have you believe. Born on April 15, 1452, in the small town of Vinci. Yep, that's where the surname comes from. Leonardo was the illegitimate son of a notary named Piero da Vinci and a woman named Caterina. Now, illegitimate might sound like a scandalous start, but in the context of 15th century Italy, it was more of a footnote than a life sentence. You see, Leonardo's dad, Piero, was a pretty well-connected guy. As a notary, he was the medieval equivalent of a high-powered lawyer, which meant young Leo wasn't exactly eating gruel by candlelight. Sure, he didn't get to inherit the family fortune, but with Piero's connections, Leonardo had access to opportunities that most could only dream of. Forget the starving artist trope. Leonardo was more of a well-fed, curious genius from the get-go. Let's talk education, or lack thereof. While today's parents might stress over the perfect school, Leonardo was busy getting his education in the school of life. He didn't have the formal education that you'd expect from a future icon of the Renaissance, but what he did have was an insatiable curiosity and a knack for observing the world around him. His informal education was driven by his fascination with nature rather than dusty textbooks. Trees, birds, rivers, rocks. Leonardo was the OG nature influencer, taking copious mental notes on the flora and fauna of his Tuscan surroundings. This hands-on learning would later fuel his scientific inquiries and groundbreaking art. But let's not sugarcoat it too much. Being born out of wedlock did have its downsides, especially when it came to career options. Leonardo couldn't follow in his father's notary footsteps, a profession closed to illegitimate sons, so he had to forge his own path, and forge he did, with a detour through the bustling artistic hub of Florence. In the 1460s, Florence was like Silicon Valley, but for art and culture, brimming with innovation and eccentric geniuses waiting to be discovered. Leonardo's ticket to this world was an apprenticeship with Andrea del Verrocchio, a renowned artist who ran one of the hardest workshops in the city. Think of Verrocchio as the Renaissance version of a startup mentor, with Leonardo being the prodigy intern soaking up every bit of knowledge he could get. Under Verrocchio's tutelage, Leonardo honed his skills in painting, sculpture, and even a bit of engineering. It was a win-win situation. Verrocchio got a talented apprentice, and Leonardo got a crash course in the cutting-edge techniques of the time. But here's where it gets interesting. While most apprentices were content to stick to their master's style, Leonardo wasn't one to stay in someone else's shadow. He was that intern who not only brought coffee, but also redesigned the company logo and proposed a new business strategy. Legend has it that when Leonardo painted an angel in Verrocchio's The Baptism of Christ, his work was so stunning that Verrocchio supposedly swore off painting forever. Talk about making an impression. Despite this early success, Leonardo's path wasn't all sunshine and divine inspiration. The economic realities of the time meant that artists had to be as savvy as they were skilled. Florence was thriving, but it was also a competitive marketplace. Artists had to market themselves, secure commissions, and perhaps most importantly, get paid. Leonardo's notebooks, filled with sketches and ideas, were also peppered with reminders to collect outstanding debts. Even a genius had to make a living after all. And let's not forget the politics. Florence was a republic, but it was far from a democratic paradise. The Medici family held significant sway, and navigating these waters required both talent and tact. Leonardo's art wasn't just about aesthetic appeal. It was a passport to the circles of power and influence. His work had to capture the eye of patrons who could afford to support his creative endeavors. In this cutthroat environment, Leonardo's illegitimacy was less of a barrier and more of a unique selling point. He was the outsider who could offer fresh perspectives, unbound by the conventions that might limit others. So, was Leonardo a penniless genius, toiling away in obscurity? Hardly. He was a product of his time, an era of economic opportunity and social mobility for those with the talent and tenacity to seize it. His illegitimate birth may have shaped his career choices, but it didn't define him. Instead, it propelled him into a world where he could reinvent himself as an artist, inventor, and thinker who would leave an indelible mark on history. And this was just the beginning. Stay tuned as our young genius finds his footing and begins to transform those early fascinations with nature into the innovations that would cement his legacy as one of history's most extraordinary minds. Just as Leonardo was finding his groove in Florence, the winds of opportunity shifted, and our favorite Renaissance parlourmath found himself packing his bags for Milan. Now, why Milan, you ask? Well, think of Milan as the Renaissance equivalent of a tech startup hub. But instead of coding apps, they were building cathedrals, crafting tapestries, and yes, commissioning art. It was 1482 when Leonardo rocked up to Milan, a city ruled by Ludovico Sforza, also known as Il Moro, a duke with a penchant for the arts, the sciences, and as luck would have it, a vacancy for a resident genius. Leonardo didn't just waltz into Milan waving a paintbrush and hoping for the best. No, he was smarter than that. He wrote one of the most famous job application letters in history, detailing his skills not in painting, but in military engineering. That's right, Leonardo pitched himself as a one-man army constructor. He promised Il Moro designs for bridges, armored vehicles, and even water pumps. If LinkedIn had been around, his profile would have screamed Renaissance innovator extraordinaire. Once in Milan, Leonardo wasn't just a painter. He was the ultimate multitasker, juggling roles like an artist-engineer-entertainer hybrid. He painted masterpieces like The Last Supper, a work that needs no introduction. Although here's a fun fact. It was painted on a wall in the Santa Maria del Grazie convent and started deteriorating almost immediately due to Leonardo's experimental technique. But that's classic Da Vinci, a visionary often too ahead of his time for his own good. While The Last Supper grabbed the headlines, Leonardo's notebooks reveal a mind that was constantly buzzing with ideas, some of which seemed to be straight out of a sci-fi movie. Flying machines, for instance. Yes, Leonardo was sketching designs for helicopters and parachute centuries before the Wright brothers got off the ground. His ornithopter concept was inspired by birds with wings that flapped. Did it ever fly? Not a chance. But the beauty was in the dreaming, and Leonardo's sketches showed an understanding of aerodynamics that was positively visionary. Yet, let's not kid ourselves. These designs, while genius in their conception, were about as practical as a chocolate teapot. Leonardo's flying machines were never built, and some of his ideas would have snapped like a breadstick under the laws of physics. But therein lies the charm, the sheer audacity of dreaming big in a world that was only beginning to explore such possibilities. Plus, his sketches weren't just creative doodles. They were detailed blueprints, complete with measurements and annotations that turned imagination into something almost tangible. Leonardo's role in Milan also included a stint as a court entertainer. Now, this wasn't about juggling or stand-up comedy. Think more along the lines of organizing elaborate pageants and theatrical productions, Renaissance style. Leonardo's engineering skills were put to good use creating stage sets and mechanical props that wowed audiences and showcased his flair for innovation. It was during this period that he designed the automaton knight, a precursor to modern robotics, which could sit up, wave its arms, and even move its jaw. It was the stuff of legends, and while the knight didn't exactly become a household item, it demonstrated Leonardo's ability to blend art with engineering in ways that were utterly mind-blowing. Of course, with great genius comes a healthy dose of drama. Leonardo's time in Milan wasn't just a walk in the park. The political climate was as turbulent as a soap opera, with Ludovico Sforza eventually getting locked up by the French and Leonardo finding himself out of a job. But economic context matters. During his Milanese years, Leonardo was earning a steady income, enough to finance his experiments and maintain a lifestyle that, while not exactly lavish, was comfortable by the standards of the day. Leonardo's notebooks from this period are a treasure trove of insight. They're filled with anatomical sketches, architectural designs, and reflections on everything from the movement of water to the flight of birds. These weren't your typical diaries. They were an amalgamation of art, science, and philosophy, testaments to a mind that never stopped questioning the world around it. If you've ever wondered what pure curiosity looks like, Leonardo's notebooks are your answer. Over 13,000 pages of relentless inquiry. And then there's the myth of Leonardo as the lone genius, toiling away in solitude. While it's tempting to picture him as a brooding artist in a dimly lit workshop, the reality was more collaborative. Leonardo worked with a team of apprentices and assistants, sharing ideas and bouncing concepts off each other. He wasn't above learning from others, and he certainly didn't create in a vacuum. His genius was as much about absorbing and synthesizing the knowledge around him as it was about individual brilliance. So, what do we make of Leonardo's time in Milan? It was a period of growth, experimentation, and yes, a fair share of unfinished projects. Leonardo's ideas may not have always been practical, but they were visionary, pushing the boundaries of what was considered possible. His time in Milan was a testament to the power of imagination and the importance of dreaming big, even when reality doesn't quite keep pace. As we leave Milan, remember this: Leonardo da Vinci was more than a painter of pretty pictures. He was a thinker who dared to imagine a world that others couldn't yet see. And while his flying machines may never have soared, his ideas certainly took flight, leaving a legacy that still inspires us to reach for the skies, even when the odds seem stacked against us. But hold that thought, because there's still more to uncover as Leonardo's journey continues, taking him to new challenges and triumphs that would further cement his place in history. Stay tuned for more on this extraordinary life. As Leonardo waved goodbye to Milan, he carried with him a legacy of unbridled curiosity that would soon lead him into the labyrinthine world of human anatomy. Now, if you think dissecting bodies was all the rage during the Renaissance, think again. This wasn't exactly an era where you could just pop down to the local morgue and ask for a cadaver to sketch. Religious and cultural taboos painted dissections as morbid curiosities rather than scientific endeavors. But Leonardo, ever the rebel with a cause, saw the human body as the ultimate blueprint of life, one that he was determined to decipher. By the 1490, Leonardo had begun conducting dissections in hospitals, working in the shadows like some kind of anatomical detective. He studied over 30 human corpses, an impressive number for the time, given the significant hurdles. Let's not sugarcoat it. Leonardo wasn't exactly equipped with the sterile labs and surgical instruments of today. Picture a makeshift workshop with the pungent aroma of formaldehyde missing from the experience. Instead, it was all blood, guts, and candlelight, with Leonardo scribbling away like a mad genius. Because let's face it, he kind of was. Leonardo's anatomical sketches were nothing short of revolutionary. His detailed drawings of the human heart, muscles, and bones were so ahead of their time that they wouldn't be surpassed for centuries. Take his depiction of the human spine, for instance. His sketches were so meticulous that they practically screamed MRI before MRIs were cool. He even managed to illustrate the first known drawing of the appendix, although the medical community of his time was far too busy leeching patients to care. Yet here's the kicker. Leonardo's findings were largely unpublished during his lifetime. Why? Enter the Renaissance version of gatekeeping, the church and societal norms. The Catholic Church had a tight grip on scientific exploration, particularly when it involved cutting open the human form. Leonardo's notebooks, filled with insights and diagrams, were essentially his private Twitter feed, brimming with brilliant thoughts that the world wasn't ready to retweet. But let's not forget the economics of it all. Dissections weren't just taboo, they were expensive. Bodies were generally reserved for medical students, and obtaining them wasn't as simple as placing a prime order. This was an era of grave robbing and clandestine arrangements, where a body might cost more than a year's worth of bread. Leonardo had to navigate this murky underworld, using his connections and charm to gain access to the bodies he needed for his studies. Imagine Leonardo's frustration. A treasure trove of anatomical insights locked away in notebooks, all because societal norms were more rigid than a medieval corset. And yet, his work was not in vain. His sketches served as a bridge between art and science, illustrating the beauty and complexity of the human form with a precision that was both artistic and scientific. They were a testament to his belief that art and science were two sides of the same coin, a radical notion in an era when the two were often seen as distinct disciplines. Despite the societal pushback, Leonardo's work laid the groundwork for future anatomists. His studies of the heart, for instance, suggested that it was more than just a blood pump. It was a marvel of engineering, complete with valves and chambers that functioned with mechanical precision. He was among the first to propose that the heart's muscular motion was responsible for blood circulation, a theory that wouldn't be fully realized until the work of William Harvey over a century later. Leonardo's anatomical pursuits also highlight an interesting paradox. The man who could paint the Last Supper with divine grace was equally fascinated by the gritty mechanics of human physiology. It was this duality, this ability to see the divine in the mundane, that made Leonardo an enigma wrapped in a riddle, wrapped in a Renaissance tunic. Yet, for all his brilliance, Leonardo was still a product of his time. While he pushed boundaries, he couldn't entirely escape the Renaissance's limitations. His anatomical studies were often interrupted by more lucrative commissions, and his sketches, though groundbreaking, were ultimately sidelined by the pressing need to pay the bills. Even a genius needs a patron, after all, and Leonardo was no exception. So, while his anatomical work remained largely in the shadows during his lifetime, it serves as a poignant reminder of Leonardo's insatiable curiosity, a curiosity that defied the conventions of his era and dared to explore the human body in ways that were both bold and beautiful. His legacy, though obscured by the sands of time, continues to inspire us to look beyond the surface and explore the intricate layers of life that lay beneath. As we peel back the layers of Leonardo's life, remember this: his journey through the human body was not just a quest for knowledge. It was an exploration of the very essence of humanity itself. And while he may have faced obstacles that kept his work hidden for centuries, his legacy as a pioneer of anatomy and science remains as vibrant today as it was in the candlelit rooms where he first dared to dream. Stay tuned, because Leonardo's journey is far from over, and his story only gets richer from here. So, as Leonardo da Vinci's life unfurled like a Renaissance scroll, he found himself trading the dissecting table for the engineering bench once more. This time, the scene was set in Rome, circa 1513. Picture a city buzzing with power players like Pope Leo X and freshly minted cardinals. Basically, you go to spot for those who want to make a name in art or politics, which were often two sides of the same Florentine coin. But Rome wasn't exactly the promised land for our multi-hyphenate genius. Sure, it was the epicenter of Christendom, but it was also a city where the artistic turf was fiercely guarded by rivals like Michelangelo and Raphael. Imagine trying to elbow your way into a VIP room where everyone already thinks they're the most important person there. Leonardo's reputation as the original Renaissance man might have been enough to get him in the door, but charm alone couldn't guarantee a seat at the table. In Rome, Leonardo's engineering chops got a serious workout. His projects ranged from the practical to the downright fantastical. For instance, he designed a plan for draining the Pontine marshes, a feat of engineering that would have rivaled the best infrastructure projects of any era. This swampy expanse near Rome was a mosquito-infested nightmare that even Julius Caesar had tried, and failed, to tackle. Leonardo's approach involved a complex system of canals and dikes, a plan that was as ambitious as it was costly. But spoiler alert, it never saw the light of day. Why? Because Roman politics was less about getting things done and more about who you knew, and Leonardo's connections were as thin as the paper his plans were sketched on. Meanwhile, Leonardo tried his hand at crafting an elaborate water clock for Vatican City. Because, time management was apparently a pressing issue for the Holy See. This contraption, though ingenious, was never completed, serving as yet another entry in his growing catalogue of brilliant yet unfinished works. It was around this time that Leonardo's health began to falter, and the Italian sun couldn't quite chase away the malaise that had settled over him. It was like life had thrown him a Renaissance curveball, and he was struggling to keep his eye on the ball. Financially, Rome was a mixed bag. While Leonardo received a stipend from Pope Leo X, it was a far cry from the lucrative commissions he had enjoyed in Milan. The papal coffers were rich, but they were also stretched thin, funding the construction of St. Peter's Basilica, an architectural marvel that was essentially the Renaissance version of a money pit. Leonardo found himself in a city where everyone wanted a piece of the pie, but there was never enough pie to go around. It was a classic case of too many cooks in the artistic kitchen, and Leonardo was left with crumbs. Yet, the legend of the Renaissance man continued to grow despite, or perhaps because of, these struggles. The romantic notion of Leonardo as a solitary genius, unfettered by worldly concerns, was as intoxicating as it was misleading. In truth, he was as entangled in the web of financial and political machinations as any artist of his time. The irony of the Renaissance man myth is that it glosses over the fact that even a polymath like Leonardo had to grapple with the mundane realities of patronage, competition, and yes, ego. By 1516, Leonardo's gaze turned northward to France, where he was invited by King Francis I, who was as much a fanboy of art and science as any monarch could be. Francis, in his typical French flair, offered Leonardo a cushy gig, court painter and engineer in residence. The French king was a kindred spirit, one who saw in Leonardo a fountain of untapped potential and a symbol of prestige for his court. So, with the promise of a steady income and the allure of new opportunities, Leonardo packed his bags and headed for the Château du Clos-Lucé, his new home nestled in the Loire Valley. In France, Leonardo's role was more of an artistic consultant than a hands-on creator. He spent much of his time at court, where he was treated as a sort of intellectual trophy. Francis, I delighted in showing him off to visiting dignitaries, eager to demonstrate that France had snagged one of Italy's greatest minds. But Leonardo's health was declining, and many of his ambitious engineering projects remained unfulfilled. His mind was as sharp as ever, but his body was a different story. One of Leonardo's endeavors in France was the design of an ideal city, a utopian vision that reflected his lifetime of observations and insights. It was a city that would minimize the spread of disease with wide streets and efficient sanitation systems. In his sketches, you can almost see the future he envisioned, one where human ingenuity triumphed over the chaos of urban life. Yet this city remained an unrealized dream, a tantalizing what-if that echoed the unfinished masterpieces of his earlier years. Speaking of unfinished masterpieces, what about the Mona Lisa, you may ask? Yes, that iconic smile was likely completed during his years in France, but Leonardo never parted with it. He took it with him wherever he went, as if it were his personal talisman. The Mona Lisa became a symbol of his life's work, a blend of artistic mastery and enigmatic allure that defied easy explanation. It's the perfect metaphor for Leonardo himself, a man whose achievements were as varied and complex as the layers of paint on that famous canvas. In the twilight of his life, Leonardo's relationship with Francis I blossomed into a genuine friendship. The king, who was known for his appreciation of the arts, valued Leonardo not just for his talents, but for his insights and companionship. It was a rare bond between monarch and artist, one that provided Leonardo with the stability he craved as his health continued to decline. Despite the comforts of the French court, Leonardo's later years were punctuated by a sense of unfinished business. His notebooks, filled with sketches and ideas, remained largely unpublished, and many of his grand engineering schemes were consigned to the realm of imagination. In 1519, Leonardo passed away at the age of 67, leaving behind a legacy that was as fragmented as it was extraordinary. The irony of Leonardo's life is that, while he is celebrated as a master of the Renaissance, many of his greatest projects were never completed. Yet, it's precisely this sense of incompletion that adds to his mystique. Leonardo's life was a testament to the power of imagination and the relentless pursuit of knowledge. He dared to dream big in a world that often failed to keep pace, and in doing so, he left behind a legacy that continues to inspire and challenge us to this day. So, as we reflect on Leonardo's later years, let's remember that the true measure of his genius isn't found in the finished pieces, but in the vast tapestry of ideas he left behind. The Renaissance man myth is both a celebration and a simplification of a life filled with complexities and contradictions. And though his journey has reached its end, the story of Leonardo da Vinci is far from over. There's still more to uncover, and the legend of the man who dared to dream remains as vibrant as ever. As we dive into the closing act of Leonardo da Vinci's saga, it's time to unravel the tangled web of myths and truths that surround his legacy. If we were to believe every romanticized tale, Leonardo was a solitary genius, the ultimate Renaissance superhero who single-handedly invented everything from helicopters to haute couture. While there's a kernel of truth in the legend, the real story is a bit more nuanced and a lot more human. Let's start with the myth of the Renaissance man. Sure, Leonardo was a polymath, dabbling in everything from anatomy to art, but he wasn't an isolated genius. His brilliance was nurtured in the collaborative environment of Renaissance Italy, a place teeming with thinkers, artists, and patrons who pushed each other to new heights. Leonardo wasn't just a lone wolf. He was part of a pack, one that included heavyweights like Botticelli and Raphael. His ideas were shaped by the conversations and rivalries of his time, not conjured out of thin air during some midnight epiphany. Now, about those flying machines and futuristic inventions. Yes, Leonardo sketched designs for contraptions that look eerily similar to modern-day helicopters and submarines. But let's be real. None of these inventions ever got off the ground, literally. His ornithopter, a bird-inspired flying machine, was a theoretical marvel, but practically about as airworthy as a stone. The genius of these sketches lay not in their execution, but in their imagination. Leonardo dared to dream of possibilities that his contemporaries couldn't even fathom. His notebooks brimmed with ideas that were centuries ahead of their time, a testament to a mind that never stopped questioning. Speaking of notebooks, these tomes are the unsung heroes of Leonardo's legacy. Over 13,000 pages filled with sketches, scientific inquiries, and artistic studies have survived the ravages of time. If you think Instagram is the ultimate platform for documenting life's minutiae, think again. Leonardo's notebooks were his personal chronicles, a Renaissance-era Instagram feed that captured the breadth of his interests and the depth of his curiosity. But how did these notebooks survive when so much else was lost? Enter Francesco Melzi, Leonardo's devoted apprentice and the custodian of his master's legacy. When Leonardo passed away in 1519, Melzi inherited his notebooks and kept them safe from the clutches of time and neglect. Melzi understood the value of Leonardo's work, even if the world wasn't quite ready to embrace it. Thanks to Melzi's dedication, these notebooks eventually found their way into the hands of collectors and scholars who recognized their significance. And what a significance it was. Leonardo's anatomical sketches revolutionized the way we understand the human body. His studies of the heart and circulatory system were groundbreaking, foreshadowing discoveries that wouldn't be made until centuries later. His drawings of the human fetus in the womb were so accurate that they remain the gold standard for centuries. Leonardo's work bridged the gap between art and science, illustrating the beauty of the human form with a precision that was both aesthetic and anatomical. Yet, for all his genius, Leonardo's life was riddled with unfinished projects and unfulfilled potential. His tendency to start grandiose projects and abandon them midway is almost legendary. But here's the thing. Leonardo's failures were as impactful as his successes. They demonstrated a willingness to experiment, to push boundaries, and to embrace the unknown. Leonardo was a man who saw failure not as an endpoint, but as a stepping stone to greater understanding. Economically, Leonardo's life was a roller coaster. Despite his fame, he was often strapped for cash, constantly juggling commissions and patronage. He knew the art of self-promotion as well as any modern influencer, but his financial struggles reveal the harsh realities of Renaissance economics. Patronage was a double-edged sword, offering both support and constraint, and Leonardo had to navigate these waters carefully to sustain his creative endeavors. Politically, Leonardo's life was no less complicated. He lived in a time when Italy was a patchwork of city-states, each with its own power dynamics and intrigue. Navigating this political landscape required a delicate balance of talent and tact. Leonardo wasn't just an artist. He was a diplomat, using his art to curry favor with powerful patrons. He understood that his work was not just about personal expression, but also a means of survival. So, what do we make of Leonardo's legacy? He was a visionary whose ideas transcended the limitations of his time, a man who dared to ask questions that others hadn't even thought to pose. His notebooks, with their blend of art and science, challenge us to think beyond the confines of our disciplines and explore the interconnectedness of knowledge. Leonardo's life reminds us that curiosity is the engine of innovation, and that failure is not a defeat, but an invitation to explore new possibilities. The myth of Leonardo da Vinci is a tapestry woven with threads of truth and fiction, a story that continues to captivate our imagination. His legacy is not just a collection of finished works, but a testament to the power of curiosity and the relentless pursuit of knowledge. As we close the book on Leonardo's life, we are left with a legacy that inspires us to look beyond the surface, to question the status quo, and to dream of what might be. In the end, Leonardo da Vinci was not just a Renaissance man. He was a Renaissance in himself, a catalyst for change whose influence reverberates through the ages. His life was a reminder that the greatest discoveries often lie at the intersection of art and science, where creativity meets inquiry. And while we may never fully unravel the enigma of Leonardo, his spirit of exploration endures, urging us to keep asking questions and seeking answers in a world that still holds so many mysteries.